without further ado, our guest this week. I don't think he needs much of an introduction, but Norm Abrams. We are sitting here in Concord, Massachusetts at the This Old House production office, and we have the honor of sitting down with Norm for about 2.5 hours, and we talk about everything from the beginning of This Old House when he didn't know it was going to be a TV show to being on a TV show to what we can do to better this industry.
To him building his own house. And we got to see pictures of it, but you guys won't because it's an audio podcast. But
yeah, that's a na poo-poo.
You guys will love this one. He's a legend.
Now, I'm Norm Abram from This Old House and, of course, the new Yankee Workshop for many years.
Very cool. So I had tried to get us to get into the new Yankee Workshop. Is that part of your property or?
No, it's not part of my property, and I can't really give away the location.
No,
but,
understood.
It still is the new Yankee Workshop, and actually a few weeks ago we had 15 of the This Old House insiders and their companions come and do a tour, and that's the only tour at that level that's ever been done.
Really?
So that was pretty amazing. I don't use it. I mean, I have it anytime I want. So I have done that a few times, but I've just built, or I'm in the process of building a private shop of my own.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Is there a plan? What's the plan with the shop itself?
That's up to the owner, what he wants to do in the long run. He still uses it himself as
really?
well. Yeah, it's right outside his door. So I met him originally is how I got connected to This Old House. So, I mean, it's no real secret that Russell Morash, who created the show, that's really his place. So I built the part of the shop where we did the finishing. And even before that, we used that shop to do segments for This Old House, because that was the first time we did sort of off-site small segments, like making some cabinet doors for a bathroom vanity or something like that. And then he came up with the idea of, well, let's do a woodworking show. And I'm like, I'm a contractor. I do finish work. We've built cabinets on site. I used to bring a table saw in and a joiner, which no one was doing that at that time. And I said, give it a try. He said, well, we'll do it 4 years, 13 episodes a year, and we'll see what happens. So after 21 years...
That's a big commitment. That's like, we'll just do it 4 years.
After 21 years, we had done way more than I ever anticipated that we would do. And we probably could have kept it going on, but I was still with House, and I really felt like we had accomplished more than we ever expected, and I just wanted a little bit of time for myself.
That's crazy. So,
timeline-wise, was the new Yankee Workshop before This Old House?
Oh, no. This Old House started in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
New Yankee Workshop was 1988.
So take us back to that conversation that led to This Old House, because that's what you had started to tell.
Right. Well, at that time, how I got into This Old House was, just really luck. I was building a house in Nantucket for a client. He's actually an architect who's worked with us on This Old House. And he also owns a restaurant in Nantucket. And Russell Morash, who created the show, he created Julia Child and Victory Garden. And Marion Morash, his wife, was the cook on the Victory Garden show. And she worked at the restaurant. So I'm down there building this house for this architect. Jock Gifford is his name. And one day, he drags Russ over to the construction site. And they show me a couple pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper and say, can you build this? And that was the sketch of the shop where the finishing was done. And that was going to be as a garden shed for the Victory Garden show, because the Victory Garden show was right outside the window. So I said, yeah, sure, I can do that when I finish up this job. And you move ahead several months. I build the shop. I remember very clearly the day I was shingling the sidewall up on the second level of the shop. And he comes out of the house and he goes, I'm thinking about doing this TV show about renovating houses. What do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what you really do. At that time, I didn't know what a TV producer does. And, he's not only a producer, but he was the director.
Mm-hmm.
So a little time goes by, and that was 1978, 79, and things were getting slow in the construction industry. So he said, well, let's go over to the house. Okay, because they had already sort of committed. I didn't know they had committed to it. So we drive over to Dorchester, and there had been some other people working on it, I think, from Bob Vela's crew. And he took me up on the scaffolding, and they had started working on the eaves because they were all rotted out and so forth. And I looked at it, and I went, if that's what you want, I'm not your guy. And he said, why? And I said, that's not the way I would do it.
Yeah.
And the quality could be better. And so I agreed to go to work on the project. Still, no mention of being on TV. And I remember going home and saying to my wife, I'm going to be on TV, and I'll be carrying a ladder. I'll be in the background. They'll see me. And second show, excuse me, he tells the audio guy to put a mic on me. I'm like, what is this all about? And so, okay, puts the mic on. I said, well, what are we going to do? He said, you're going to go up on the scaffolding, and you're going to explain to Bob what happened and what you think you can do and what we can salvage and so forth. And the bottom line is that was when it started, and who ever knew that it was going to go that long? I mean, I looked back at that show when his 40th anniversary came and looked at that show that day, and I said, oh, if OSHA was there that day, we would have been in trouble. No railings. Back then, wooden pump jacks. Yeah. The rough cut planks sagging. And I got a hole in the back of my pocket. I got a stupid hat on, and I'm up there, and it's freezing cold. It's like February or something like that. And I just did it, and that's kind of where it started. And, it kind of rolled and got more detailed. I think 3 or 4 months we finished that house. And Russ said, I don't know where this is going to go. But I'll let you know if I see anything.
Sure.
And about 6 months later, he called me up. He went over to Newton, where there was this Bigelow house, which was an H.H. Richardson design. It was all boarded up. The Historical Society owned it, so it had some restrictions on how it would get renovated. And we went ahead and moved on that project. And I've said recently, that's the project that really put us on the map. We were there for over a year, doing that project, and that's still my favorite project. That was an incredible building. We turned it into 5 condominium units, but kept the structure on the outside looking historical.
Wow!
And it was a bunch, it was different people we hired over the friends of Russ's, people I had, and then we started hiring more people. And a couple of the guys who worked on that project worked for me for many, many years.
It seems like it was a pretty organic progression of the TV show and how you kind of got into it. At what point did you realize, hey, this is what I'm actually doing? Because I feel like I could be doing that and, hey, mic him up and just start. And at that point, it would take a fair amount of work or doing this for a while under my belt to be like, oh, okay, we're making a TV show now.
I think I never thought of it kind of as the TV show because you're filming something you're not going to see for months. And so you just kind of do it. And I mean, I don't know if Russ ever said this, but the way I approached it was that he just wanted me to do what I had been doing, And so there's a camera over your shoulder, if you can move that out of the way and just say, I'm going to work like I normally work. Of course, that's not the way it really turns out because they stop you and you got to shoot the scene again.
Get rid of the hat.
Yeah.
Patch the hole up.
That's right. Well, no, in some ways, we were real. I mean, it was like we weren't doing it, we were just doing work, basically. Just Russ's mission was to teach or educate homeowners what it takes to renovate a house. And not necessarily that you would do it all yourself, but just understand the process and what things are important and when things are not important. That's the way all his shows were. The Victory Garden, all of those were.
I think that's what we look at media today, like with social media, is that we're not trying to educate them so they can do it themselves.
Right.
We're showing the ins and outs of what we do and the value that we create and the quality that we put into it, so people value it.
Right.
And that's exactly I think it was Rich was on our podcast and we were talking about how, the trade secret thing came up, and we said this old house has been doing it for 40 years. Yeah. It's like they're showing everything. They're, anyone can learn from it, and in our world, we're just choosing to be the leader in that, and showing and helping communicate and showing what goes into what we do.
Right. I think there's two other things with that as well, and that's getting homeowners to respect craftsmanship, because a lot of them don't. I'm sure you guys have run into customers that you're like, just stay out of my way and let me do my job. But the other thing, it was contractors. When I went to the first, international builders shows or any of those, and you get on the bus from the hotel to go to the convention center, and then you come back and these guys are going, what are you doing this for? Or what do you mean? Well, you're giving up all the secrets. And I said, no, we're not. They said, DIYers are going to be DIYers no matter what we do, number one. Number two, isn't it better to educate them in terminology and technique than to not? And you're just being insecure. And I think finally they kind of got it. I said, we're not trying to take anything away from you. We're actually trying to make it better for you so that the public understands what you really do.
Yeah.
Do you know what Russell's intent was with that? Because I feel like the way that we market ourselves and try and articulate what we're doing is to help the industry that we're in, and also so that, we can either charge a premium or get paid to do the level of work that we want to do. But what was his intent if he wasn't in the building industry at that point to kind of show the world why you should value the trades?
Well, he did do that to a certain extent. I mean, I remember one project we did where the scene was created in a way to do exactly that, to show the respect of the quality of the work, that if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And so that came later. I think in the beginning, it was like not knowing where this was going to go. You just kind of trying to get people to get in to watch it and be entertained by the process. And a lot of our viewers don't even know how to swing a hammer, I'm sure, but they appreciate the knowledge. But I think as the show has gone on, we have sort of created a way of doing it, even since when Russ was there, and even now, that's still trying to educate the public about our skills and the technology to do it, and that, if you do it right, we don't say, it's going to cost more. It's just like, do it right. That's it'll pay off in the long run.
Sure.
Before the garden shed, you were building a house on Nantucket, right?
Yep.
Who were you working for?
I was working for the architect.
So was it your own company, though?
Yeah, it's my own company.
So you were in business for yourself?
Well, that came, I was sort of in phase 2 of my business.
Okay.
When I got out of school, I went to the University of Massachusetts. I took mechanical engineering for 2 years and said, I love being in the machine shop, but I hate a class with 600 students in thermodynamics. So fortunately, because of some friends I had, they convinced me to stay in school. And this was the late 60s, 70s, a lot of stuff going on back then. So I switched over to the business side of school, thinking, well, maybe I'll start a business of my own someday. My father was a carpenter. That's where I learned it from. So when I got out of school, I didn't get a degree. I saw an ad on a bulletin board of a company in Boston, Cambridge, I think it was. They were doing a startup. There were 3 guys went to MIT and 1 went to Harvard. And they actually created something that was way ahead of their time. We were doing site-built panels for these condos that were almost
in the 60s.
That would have been the early 70s, because I left school in 1971. So what they did is we would go on a construction site. The first one I went on was in Vermont, and they'd build a table on the ground with the legs all level, put a roof over it, no walls, and then they'd have somebody come in and take it. They had all these plans for every single wall, and so they'd jig it up with 2x4s and use unskilled labor with nail guns and put the panels together. The mistake they made is they jumped too far too fast, and what they decided to do right off is, even on the floor systems, pre-cut everything. And you can't do that with dimensional lumber because it just doesn't work that way. But it was pretty successful the way it worked. And I went there as a carpenter. That's what I was going to get paid for. Walk up there with my tools the first day, and the guy goes, the super goes, Oh, you won't need those today. He said, oh, really? Just got a condo here with somebody I'm bunking up with. And he said, no, we're not quite ready for that. He said, can you dig holes for sonotubes? I said, yeah, I did that when I was 11.
Yeah, right.
So I said, sure. So I dug. And then the foreman, they had project manager and then like a guy who was just in charge of sort of the systems, the mechanical systems. The foreman, he had to go back to school. I got his job. And because I got a salaried position. And then I moved around a lot. We went to Maine. We worked at Bowdoin College. I did another project back in Vermont, Western Mass, a couple projects in Western Mass. And I would control everything that had anything to do with wood. And then the other guy would control most of the systems. They wanted me to go into the office in Boston and manage the managers for what I did. And I said, I love being in the field. So one of the guys I hired, he and I became partners. And the first job we did was we did a local job in Western Mass. And then the first job we did to the same architect the architect that ultimately brought me to Russ. My company called and said, can we have you run this job? And I said, I got work right now. Then I was getting slow. So I said, what happened to that project? They said, well, the architect's on the next floor. Why don't you talk to him? I did. We bid the job. We drove over, and I had never been on Nantucket. We drove over there, checked out the lumber yards to see what kind of, material cost was going to be and so forth. And we got the bid, and we had a penalty clause because it had to open for summer. So we built this project, and I've lived on Nantucket every month except January. But we broke ground in January, and we opened it in June.
Wow.
The two of us, and we used some local subs. So that was, so I had that. And then my partner wanted to go back to Western Mass where he grew up. And so I moved back to Eastern Mass and I started I bought him out because I had put more money into the company anyway. And then I just started I did some new houses, I did some renovations, and that ultimately led up to meeting Russ.
This podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork. So Tyler, I keep telling you that we're going to be using this stuff over at our Need and Build. And I've been going through the profiles with Mike and Liz on site. And, I mean, we have a lot of profiles.
And the profiles are spec'd by the architect.
They're spec'd by the architect, yeah. He's like, hey, can you custom run these? And I was like, absolutely. Duration can make them, and we'll make them out of boral. And we actually had a meeting with the client, and they were asking, hey, what are we going to use for product here? Is it going to be a PVC or is it going to be a wood? I'm like, no, it's actually a poly ash product, and kind of brought them up to speed as to why we were using it, and really talking about the durability long term and the fact that we'll be able to paint it. There's not only multiple profiles, but also multiple colors on it, and a lot of it gets painted really dark. So obviously with the PVC concerns, painting something dark, that's a real issue. We have a lot of curved roof lines, which I've seen around here, at least. A lot of people will do that out of maybe wood or maybe boral, and then use PVC for the curve because they can heat it up and bend it. But Duration can make all that stuff, and we're going to get them all of these profiles spec'd out, and then we'll have a set of shop drawings done, and they'll actually ship all of this stuff in just a few weeks to us, all custom radius work for us.
I'm not sure about you, but I just despise painting PVC because the whole point of it is supposed to be maintenance free, and now now you have to maintain it, and it's a real pain in the butt. It
also, I feel like it feels weird to paint.
Yeah, I don't. It especially to paint it dark. I've done it before, and it's a very expensive and involved process that specialty paints, cleaners, it's a big pain in the butt.
Pain in the butt. If you guys want to learn more, durationmillwork.com, and make sure you follow them on Instagram. This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool, a high-performance, fire-resistant, soundproofing stone wall insulation for your interior and your exterior walls. We have been using it in all of our projects. I know, Tyler, you primarily use it in interior renovation for sound control.
Yep, and fire blocking.
But we're, especially in our new builds, we're oftentimes avoiding foam entirely, on our projects. So working with the Rockwool team to make sure that when we're designing it, when we're framing it, we're making sure that we're taking into consideration the R values that these walls need. And they're also coming to the table with solutions that, we aren't always up to speed on, or new product innovation. And one of the reasons that they offer this feedback to us is because we're part of that R-Class program. And it's a premium partnership program for builders and a community for those who take pride in their craft and are always looking to learn about better materials, installation techniques. But they're always there to work with us on our projects in the design phase, but also in the construction phase. And they've went as far as come out to our project to see the stuff being installed and make sure that we're doing it correctly.
Yeah, I was speaking with somebody actually at Selby at a softball tournament this weekend, and they were insulating. They did like an energy retrofit, and they were talking about how they put foam boards against their foundation. And I really started digging into, my brain started running wild during the game. But like, there's a lot of advantages to sealing something with foam, but it's also very potentially dangerous to do so if you're trapping moisture. And with something like Rockwool, obviously, like on your project, you buried it below grade, so moisture isn't going to be an issue. If you don't want it to be vapor open, you can get a hold of them and figure out a sort of product that's going to, be put wherever it needs to prevent that transmission of moisture, but also it can breathe if you need it to. And like, in this situation that he's telling me, where he doesn't know what the exterior sealed with, and now he's sealing the interior with foam, and I'm like, what's going to happen to your top plate if none of that moisture can get out of there? So it's a good company with a good product, a ton of different options, and like you said, with that R-Class program, they can help walk you through all of those details.
And prevent what you're talking about, trapping moisture, and that's really where they have a whole technical team to work with that. So if you guys want to join that program, rockwool.com/rclass. This podcast is brought to you by Upstate Merch, quality focused screen printing, embroidery, and graphic design shop in Whitney Point, New York. You guys know them. They print all of our swag for the Modern Craftsman. They print our shirts for NS Builders, Material Millwork. I think they print Tyler's t-shirts.
Correct.
Make them some hats. Dylan's been our go-to for a ton of our clothing and our swag. So if you guys are looking for embroidered hats, safety wear, polos, hoodies, you're looking for top quality garments to outfit your team, they have you covered. And they've been super flexible with us, where I'm super picky with clothes. So when I find something I like, I usually order 25 of them, and I call Dylan. I'm like, hey, there's going to be a box showing up with 25 hoodies that I found that I really like. Can you print on them? And he's always been more than willing to accommodate me and my team. So if you guys want to check them out, upstatemerch.com. And if you mention the Modern Craftsman podcast, you're actually going to receive 10% off your first order when you email them print@upstatemerch.com.
Somebody actually just got a hold of me today and was like, hey, that stuff where you get your the place where you get your shirts printed, can I have their contact? And I was like, yo, email them and mention the podcast, and you'll get 10% off your first order too. I felt like a big shot. I was like, pulling my weight. It's funny to hear even to price out lumber, to take a drive to where you're going to visit the lumber yards to price out lumber,
or never being to Nantucket and then moving there to build one project.
Yeah, we got free housing, thanks to some guy just said, oh, well, you can have that apartment for as long as you want. And I wasn't married.
Not now.
I wasn't married, but my partner was. And so I didn't have to go home. I just stayed there.
Yeah.
And it was tough because the locals don't like it if you're there. But I think that attitude has changed a bit. And, I ended up buying almost all the material offsite.
And burying it in.
But we did a really smart way. I mean, we I think we had 2 major deliveries with big trailer, and I set it up with the ferry so that they could come to the parking lot. I had a lift there, just throw it on the ground and get back on the ferry so that you not have to stay overnight. And we did that twice, and we had it was a pretty good sized building.
Wow.
And then we hit winter. which you don't get as much snow down there. If you do, it kind of melts off pretty quickly. It's cold down there, but
yeah, windy.
Yeah. And then after that, when he left, I worked for one family who owned property in Nantucket. I worked for that family exclusively on 3 houses in Nantucket and 1 house in Manchester by the Sea for over 2 years.
Wow.
And never had to tell them what it was going to cost. It was all cost plus. They just said, "Well, just build it for us." And don't you love that when somebody says, just send me the bill.
What about, let's go back to when you were 11 years old digging sonotubes.
No, I was more than 11 sonotubes.
No, but you said you did it when you were 11. So
well, with my father, my father was like, I had to learn everything. I just hung around by his side. He didn't have his own company. Mm-hmm. He worked, so if we had to dig for footings or anything like that, we would do that. If you had to lug the lumber, you had to work in the winter. I remember working in the winter for many years.
When did you start working for your dad?
Well, the first time I was ever on a job site, I was like 9.5, and it was a one-day thing. It was the day before Christmas. I remember this. He was working for another contractor, a renovation guy, and he took me to this house where they were laying hardwood floors. And back then, you didn't have pneumatic nails. Mm-hmm. You were going to use cut nails. And my father had taken a milk crate and took a circular saw and mounted it underneath, so it made like a miniature table saw.
Also not OSHA approved.
Right. Well, back then it probably didn't matter, because that was 1958, around there, 58, 59. And so, he taught me how to lay floors. You drive the nail, you take the nail, you use it to set, and I always remember that night, because that night when we were driving home, he said, "What do you think you're going to get for Christmas?" And I said, "Bicycle." And sure enough, the next morning I got the one and only bicycle I ever had as a kid that I kept forever, and then eventually got given to a friend's daughter. And then my father changed with a couple companies, but as soon as I was, all through high school and through college, I worked every summer and every school vacation with him. And mostly, some of it was renovation. The majority of it was custom-built homes that were already sold. So, pretty good-sized contract. My father was pretty much the lead guy.
So you did everything, whatever he needed.
I was just talking about that the other day, that now everything's so specialized. We would come up to a foundation, and we'd put the sills, frame the floor, frame the walls, get the roof built. We'd put the windows in, we'd side it. And back then, you would leave when the subs came in. So you do your electrical and plumbing and HVAC, whatever. And back then, we were still using rock lab. So I remember that I would always get stuck in the closet. Good thing I wasn't going by the bundle, because I wouldn't make any money. But it was fun. Sometimes I got a little teasing from some of the guys who worked there, because I was the youngest one on the job site. But we worked through winter. I remember being shoveling snow off of roofs so you could finish them. And so I got the whole gamut of working in all the different conditions. And then I eventually started doing trim work inside. And by the time I got out of college, I had got to that level, and I was ready to go someplace else.
I feel like I'm stealing John's question here, but do you look at the way we are today with everything being specialized versus what it was back then, where you come in and you kind of run everything you possibly could? Do you look at one or the other being a better formula?
It's hard to say. I think for the time periods, it works. I think today, with the amount of work that's out there now, I don't know if you'd be able to find enough skilled people who could do all of those things well. So I think if you separate them and you get people who are really good doing it. For instance, I just did a house in Rhode Island. I don't have all the resources to be my own contractor now, but I got a really good guy, and everything was split. And some of the subs, like for sidewall shingling or anything, they're much better. If that's if that's what they want to do and the only thing they want to do, they usually do a really, really good job.
Yeah.
It's so I think the times have just changed, and to decentralize it into individual skills is the way it's probably going to be from now on.
Yeah, and I just think that, being that you don't go on site and you do everything, it is broken up and specialized. I think that, you're right. The guys that are focused on one task can get really good at it because that's what they're doing it repetitively. Right. But I also think that that's doing a disservice in the sense that when they do come across something that's not what they do every day, then they don't have that skill or they're hindered by it.
Right, like if the plumber's got to have some framing redone and he's not there and there's no carpenter,
right,
then
like,
you're kind of stuck. Yeah, you're right. And that's why what I did when the last job I did was a really big job, and I had two of my guys, and we were really running it as a project management job, but I had two people that had been working for me there, and they could cover those, multiple things. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you don't realize how much of that is on a big job of having to know everything or have your hand in everything or help out or answer questions or whatever that may be. I feel like from a production standpoint, and also there's a trainability aspect to that, where I'm a small company contractor and we self-perform a lot because that's just what I enjoy doing. I like the variation. I like being able to hone different skills. But finding an employee that's going to become proficient and train them at multiple different trades is so difficult. Right. Maybe they excel at one trade and another trade they don't, but then getting them to be good at multiple trades and relatively quick and efficient, it's so difficult. Right. If you just have a trim company or just an exterior company or just a masonry company, those people, it's so much easier to train somebody. This is what we do every single day.
Right. But that's as a general contractor, you do have to know all of that.
Sure.
At least you may not be able to totally execute it quickly or as efficiently as the professional would, but all the pieces and the situations you might come up against. And I find that, the really good contractors, the lead guy really has to have a broad vision and knowledge of all the systems. You don't have to know, like when Richard's on there and he's doing one of his HVAC things. I remember watching one a few weeks ago. There was the one with the new HVAC systems that has all these, the energy gets saved and it goes in and out. And I'm thinking, Richard, that's cool. I love listening to that because now I understand it a little bit. But most of our viewers are going, what is this guy talking about? And so for the pros, that's really good. And homeowners, they don't really care about that either. But as being a GC, I always felt that I had learned enough along the time that I was with my father that I at least if I didn't know how to do it, I could find the right person to do it.
Yeah, I think having that end vision is so important, and knowing how to get there, and at least having a general idea of the steps that it's going to take and the sequence that it's going to take, because I feel like if you don't have that, there's going to be slip-ups. You're going to be working backwards and fixing things, and then fingers getting pointed in different directions and everything else.
John, I think about when you had your apprentice, right? A couple months ago. It was you said just be a sponge.
Yeah, it's tough to do. I wanted to take an approach like you do, Nick, where you have carpenters and apprentices on the job site. Me being a GC, I grew up, I don't even want to say like Norm, but I grew up doing everything. Like one of the first jobs I was on, I was digging sonotubes with the machine and all that stuff, being the grunt if I needed to be. And then on the same job, we had hand nailers for the floors that were all same way, no pneumatic. My old boss would not buy anything pneumatic. And I grew up that way, but we did everything. The old school, I'm raising my fingers, air quotes, is frame to finish. Like, there's not a lot of guys that can do that anymore. And like you gave an example earlier of let's say the plumber shows up and needs something moved. There's a lot of GCs today that then need to go find a carpenter. Right. Like, instead of going to their truck and grabbing a saw and doing something, like we talk about gap. There's a gap in knowledge that can really run a job for those details. Like I still find today, I might find a sider that just knows how to blow out a wall of siding, not know how to do a detail on a gable end with a return that really needs to get done. And my guys that are PMs can't do it, but I have to show up and get up on the ladder and staging and kind of do it.
You're bridging the gap.
I have to spread the knowledge. That's what my job is. But to get back to the apprentice, the hard part for me being an apprentice, having one, was that I would love to be more hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I have to run projects. It just has to be that way.
Right.
So I tried to do it where I would have him like the stair guy. He was there, a carpenter finish guy, lead guy, doing the stairs. I go, just don't even bring up tools. Just try and think ahead of him. If he's reaching for something, think of what he needs next. Just watch him. Just try and understand it, because the pace of this industry now is so quick that no one's going to tell you to stand back and just watch and learn.
Right. Yeah, you always got to be doing something. I mean, I used to always say to my guys, I never want to see, and Tommy does the same, never want to see you standing around doing nothing, because even if you have to, sweep the floors, you do it. You just don't say, well, I don't know what to do. There's always something to do.
There's always something to do.
Do you think, so, and this is a hard question, but do you think that today's industry or that today's generation is harder to teach than, say, maybe when you were a kid?
Yeah, I think so, because, and this is this whole skills gap, I think, and we would talk, I'm a trustee at Old Sturbridge Village, and I was at a meeting there today because we're expanding they have a charter school, but also was there because we're going to be reinstalling an actual cabinet shop that used to be there, and then we have real interpreters. And of course, this is 1840 history, but they're kind of teachers in a way. But I think, it is harder to do it. One I found early on when I was contracting is when I was with my father, we used to get the top student out of like the local technical school. Thought they knew everything, wanted top dollars. That's not the way it works. You haven't learned enough in the school, never mind in the field. Some of the programs now where you pick up the skill and then you're out in the field and then you're in the classroom and you're in the field, I think that helps. But I think youth is too anxious to think that they know it all, so to speak. And so it takes a lot of patience. I used to say to my people, and I can remember taking a carpenter's pencil and drawing sketches on walls and stuff, is like, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know what I'm asking you to do, then please ask me, because you're only hurting me and yourself if you don't. If you think you're smart enough to do it, but you're not, I'm not going to get angry with you if you come to me and say, I have no idea what you really want me to do. I'll explain it to you. Then you better take it in and, move forward with it. I don't expect it to, to know everything all at once. And maybe we have to do more of that now. And I don't know if the attitude,
You find the attitude is poor.
Yeah, it depends who you're talking to. I mean, I see some of the people who, like immigrants who are coming in here who work really hard and they do want to learn. Yeah. So there's a mixed group there. There are some who are more than anxious to learn and will listen and learn. And I think there's a lot who, because they don't have any interest in it at all, it seems like, and then they go, well, I want to do this. And it all starts with, we took all this out of the schools. There's no home ec, there's no shops anymore. And that was part of a discussion we had today when we were about this shop we're building, is that we need to do more of that. And I think I'm starting to see a little more of that. When I was at the AWFS last week or so ago, and I had a lot of teachers come through who said that they're ramping up their courses and so forth. So you got to get them young. And we're not trying to get everybody to learn these skills. I think we were in my generation, my parents, they just wanted you to know how to do stuff. They weren't pushing you in a way. It's like, this is common sense things that you should understand.
Yeah.
And if we could do that better, I think it would help. But until we do that, it's hard to get them to really focus.
Well, I think they get exposed to it less. Like going back to getting pulled out of schools,
there's no opportunity.
There's no opportunity for kids to have. We just did a house for somebody, and their son during the process. Like, I like when kids go there because they obviously have to keep an eye on them. But people talk about a safe site.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll have a job site meeting, but still have the kids there, because that's who I really want to talk to. Is a client is a client. I'm building that, but these kids, you can influence them, and I might only get to influence 5 or 6 kids, but their oldest son, Declan, John actually, the guy who mentioned it, he's like, look on his bedside table. And I looked at his bedside table. He took a jar of sawdust during the project and he keeps it by his bedside.
That's
like, so he's been exposed to it where now he might think of it differently going forward, that this path of being a contractor or a builder is different. Like, we got to build something from scratch and it was his house. Like, I think did your dad build?
Yeah, built both houses I grew up in.
So like that's dead though, for like the most part.
Yeah.
Like, not all. When I grew up, it was like I'm living in this house that my grandfather built, and that's being lost. But I think being able to expose kids to that's like they made all the decisions as a family. That house is more than just a piece of equity in their overall financial, portfolio.
And it's exposing the kids to it even at a minor level, a very introductory way. My feeling is that if you took 1 out of every 10 kids who get exposed to that decides they want to get into the trade, that's a home run.
Absolutely.
I
talk to, obviously my peers, and it's like, I'll talk to a guy that will be super successful, and he'll just say, I just wish I had some of the skill that you have as a carpenter or as a builder, because I can't do anything. I have to call someone to fix my cabinet door or rehang a door or change a light bulb, like to that level. And it's, I think it was my brother that made the reference that, growing up, I'd always work on cars. It was just like fun for me, and carpentry was always going to be my career. And he had said to me one day, he was like, you're lucky in the sense that you can build a house and fix your car, the two most expensive things you're going to own. And he's like, and I can't do either.
Right.
I have to hire everything out. Yeah. But it's not that you're trying to, hey, you should be a home builder or a plumber or electrician. No. You should just understand it.
You just got to get them young, so they don't really, they just kind of get exposed to it. There's no.
Give them an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. We're not asking them to become a craftsman. We're just saying, let's, we'll have a class about doing very simple things. And then, like you say, some of them are just going to say, wow, this is really cool to do, and I want to try to move that forward. You're in the same as I am. I'm a car guy, too. Right. And my father was a mechanic in the service and during World War II, and he could weld and everything. So I had a blast doing that, too. So it was like two crazy things, was carpentry and cars.
Yeah, and growing up, it was never weird to me. It was just what we, even my friends, we would all build forts and work on our go-karts or whatever. And to think now that just doesn't exist as much. Right. And my father is in the trades. He owns a fence company, and I grew up, I started working there when I was 11 years old. So I was always exposed to it, but I loved it. And I loved I loved building with my hands and working. I don't know. I always liked working really hard.
I mean, to your point about, training apprentices, that's hard as a contractor because you don't have the time to train them as well as you would like to train them. And then sort of now that it sort of went out of the school systems, it gets even more difficult because they don't even have exposure. Mm-hmm. I did a scene with Charlie Silver on one of the projects last year, and we had a little issue to do with a railing situation. And the whole idea was to come at it at the end and say, this is how it works. This is why this trade is so rewarding. There was a problem. We use our mind to kind of figure out how we can fix it or make it correct. We use our hand skills to actually do the job. And at the end of the day, you can look at it and be proud of something you did, what then wasn't there earlier in the day. Mm-hmm. Or to be able to drive by a house that you worked on and just say, I helped build that house. It's this pride. I mean, it's, as Mike Moreau says, we're all the people who make life comfortable for the rest of the people. And I remember when we first got into this, some people, our friends of mine would say, what is Generation Next? And I said, have you tried to get a plumber or electrician lately? And they said, yeah, come to think of it, it's a problem. I said, if you think doctors are expensive now, if we don't fix this, they're going to be cheap.
Yeah, it's so true. So true.
It is. I mean, I think that exposure is one thing. You're exposed as a child to so many different professions, but that spark has to be there.
Yeah.
That was in all of us, and I think that there's different reasons that people do this, and I don't think that any of them are necessarily financially driven because it's not the most lucrative career ever, but I think that's within you. And at least if you are able to expose kids to this, that you may somewhat touch that part of them that wants to bring this out, who's like, hey, I like building things, or as Norm just said, like, this was the problem and we addressed the problem, and then we inventoried the problem and figured out how to solve that problem. And that, I mean, for me, that's so much of it every day, whether it's the smallest thing ever. It's just all I do all day long is solve problem. Nothing is ever goes according to plan. Nothing's the way that you assume it to be. It's just solving problems and making it appear as if it was seamless. And I think that there's all different reasons that these kids will have that spark within them, but it is exposing them to them, because I went to the doctor many times as a child and I never want to become a doctor, but the only time that kids are exposed to this now is if their parents have the luxury of hiring somebody to work on their house. They're not going and working in the summers as Norm did, as Nick did, as John did. So realistically, so much of it with it out of the schools now is somebody working on your parents' house.
Yeah, and I think, with Generation Next, and, there's a handful of advocate groups for it, but we talk about it, the three of us, how do we make an impact? How can we directly hit the next generation to a point where they're so enticed about what we do that they're getting into it and they're solving that gap? And the more we talk about it and the more we podcast about it, the more, at least and I'm speaking for myself, realize that that's what we're doing by talking about it.
Right.
We're creating this buzz around it. We're talking about it. We're talking to guys like you, and just people are genuinely interested, realizing that I never considered that, but now I might.
Yeah.
And the fact that schools are switching back and bringing some of these shops back, that's tangible.
Right.
Think 3 years ago that they were leaving.
Right.
And they were all being removed from the schools, to the point where now the fact that they're going back says that what you guys are doing, what we're doing, it's making its way back to where it needs to, and that's obviously in the school system.
Right. I know when we were in IWS, the International Builders Show, or at IBS, we had another little panel discussion and kind of came to the conclusion. I think Richard said it right. He said, money alone isn't going to solve this problem. It's got to be something else. And so it's kind of the inspiration. It was nice when I was at the woodworking show this couple of weeks ago. A lot of people were coming through saying, I'm doing this because of what we saw you guys do on the show. And I think our apprentices, guys like Nathan, who's one of the best apprentices we've had. He's one of the first ones. He was with me for this visit down there, and we did this thing. They called it a web. Instead of like a TED Talk, it was a web talk. It was something new they were trying to start. They didn't give us enough information. I didn't think I did as well as I should have done. But it's just getting those kids just a little bit. It's not going to take a lot. But we just got to keep at it. It's something that's certainly going to change a lot of people's lives if they kind of can see the way to go.
It's funny, when I went through school, there was so many classes I went to that I wasn't a very good student because I just didn't know how to apply myself, and I never got it until way later, like maybe my junior year of college, that I'm using this stuff in the field all the time, because that was kind of where I navigated towards. So when I went and spoke at a kid's elementary school, and I brought tape measures just to kind of give away at the end, and it made me realize when I was doing that, hindsight's better. I wish I could have said my whole idea was to get these kids to know math better, but it wasn't. But they all, to see them react with the tape measures was so crazy that they're measuring the height of their head.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, I'm like, maybe some of these kids will look at math a little differently as they get into middle school and high school, because just for this one little interaction, I brought pictures of some of the builds and how they progress, because I track everything, and it's like, this is where we started, this is what we're doing, and you have bedrooms, someone built that. I think that so much of this is lost because no one knows where it came from.
Right.
My dad wasn't around, so I was never exposed to this industry except for you guys. Literally, I turned 40 this year, and in conjunction with this old house.
That's cool.
So it's like, that's all I ever watched, but that was the exposure I needed to kind of pursue it.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy that if you don't have it in school, this whole house is around, but there's so much other content that people are absorbing, that having a podcast, having YouTube, all that stuff out there, it's the only way we're going to connect with these kids now.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just trying to make that connection. I mean, I met this woman one night. We were at an opening for a friend who was an artist, and this woman came in and she said to me, my son is a builder because of this old house. And I said, how old is he? Where does he live? Can we get in touch with him? Because at that point we were trying to find profiles that we could put in the magazine. And he actually made the first magazine where we started doing profiles. And I never have got to meet him, but so she said, yeah, he wanted to do stuff. And she said, I wanted to have a sliding glass door in my kitchen. And he said, I can do that. And I guess his father really wasn't very skilled. And long story short, he actually got it done. And then he continued on and started his own business, got a website, the whole deal. She disappears. She comes back a little while later, and that was when she sort of told me the story. And I said, good for you for letting your son pursue what he wanted to do. So the other thing we have to break is parent attitude.
Yeah.
Because parent attitude is like, you don't want to do that job. Big mistake. Right. Big mistake. And it's like, don't control your kids so much that they're doing what you want them to do instead of doing what they want to do. And that's another thing that I think can be folded in with, in a very, not in a heavy way, but folded into exposure. Mentoring is still another thing too. We started talking about that word the other day, mentoring. My father was my mentor. It's hard to be a mentor when you're doing the work as well. Like you guys are all saying, you got to do your job, but, and how do you be a mentor at the same time? I think if you can get apprentices in who are willing to not have an attitude about it, I think our apprentices, I was impressed with their interviews that were done for the web, where they said, we know this is a lifetime experience of learning, because it's going to change continuously, and that we don't know it all in a way. And if we had to sweep the floor, we swept the floor. If we had to do demo, we did demo. And you do what you asked to do, and it's all valuable in the end. It's all satisfactory work. Even demo is satisfactory. In fact, as I get older, I'd like to do less demo.
Yeah.
But demo is when you get all your frustrations out. But we got to change attitude of parents. I mean, it's like, come on.
So going back to in the 70s, you were in college.
Yeah.
What pushed you into college?
Well, my father wanted me to go to college. I think parents even back then wanted their kids to do the best path that they considered the best path. And I was a good high school student. I was honor society and all that business. And when it came down to when I realized it's not what I wanted to do, I didn't want to, I wanted to be a builder. And that was one of the hardest decisions that I had to make. And I thought my father would be upset with me when I announced that. I was terrified. I mean, not that my parents were mean or anything, but they were very strict.
Yeah.
I mean, that generation always was. And surprisingly, when I sort of broke the news, my mother was mad. My father wasn't mad. And I think my father was concerned. But when he saw me moving forward and creating a business and starting to build and renovate homes, when I built my house in Carlisle, which is only a few miles from here, he was retired. He came up every weekend, and we worked on that house together. So, he was in his late 60s, and his knees were shot. How we go through all the pain. And so I used to set him up with trim, and I set him up with stuff for window casings and everything. And of course, even for him, there was a learning curve, because we had pneumatic nailers and really good chop saws and everything. But he was there. So a part of him is in my house. He's passed away now, but that was a great experience for me. It was better than any of the time we spent before that, because this was my house.
Yeah.
And it's his house too. So,
did he ever talk to you about watching your journey? Like at 9, you were on those job sites, and then you grow up to be kind of the face of the industry.
Kinda.
No, but I'm just saying, like, what was your dad's take on that? Like,
my father was a very quiet person. He was at Battle of the Bulge, World War II. So he was young. I mean, when all those guys were. I mean, my wife's father was a B-17 bomber pilot, got shot down over Germany and walked out. I mean, those people, they're very quiet. I think, if today's parents would sort of have the attitude my father had, which was, let him try it out, doesn't like it, okay, and he never, when we were learning, I just think back, did my father actually, sit down and teach me everything? I remember going in, he had a table saw and set up in the basement, and he would bring home material every once in a while to build like a vanity or something. And it was really just watching at first. Then it was, oh, you want to sand these? Okay, I'll sand those by hand. And then, you started learning little bit things, and then you start thinking a little bit more yourself. And I used to have a space in my basement in the house I grew up in that I could just do whatever I wanted to do. Some of it was mechanical, some of it was wood. And he never forced it on me. So the parents, I think that's the best way to do it, obviously. If you force somebody to do it, they're gonna fight back. One thing I want to mention without forgetting is when you were talking about apprentices, and I was talking with Nathan, another point I brought up is for us who are older, and me, I'm much older than you guys, but I know from having kids that as a parent, they don't want to listen most of the time.
No,
but
impossible.
But if one of their counterparts told them the same thing I told them, they'd probably go along with it. So guys like Nathan, the young apprentices that we're bringing up, can influence this more than anybody else.
Absolutely.
We had the conversation with my daughters recently why they behave in school but not at home. It's because they can get sent to the principal at school. And I was like, I am way more powerful than the principal. Like, you should be way more afraid of me than the principal, or listening to their cousins or sister or whatever it may be. Even the conversation this weekend, when I tell you to do something, like, let's just practice, not your first response shouldn't be why. It's just, okay. Like, every time, it doesn't matter. It's like, put that shoe on for why. Every single thing that you tell them. But I think it's a valid point that it doesn't just need to come from the top, or, there's a lot of kids at that age where they're at the age that they can be influenced, that they basically want to say no to anything that their parents tell them.
But also, like, I look at some of the younger guys, because I have a lot of apprentices, and my mindset with them is that, I want to take a different approach, and I want to give them the time and the resources to take, to do their very best. Mm-hmm. And I look at it now, it could be classified as a burden. It costs a lot of money mm-hmm. because they mess up and I tell them to do it again, or it's, that's good, but you can do it better. But what I see the most reaction out of is when they work together. Mm-hmm. And this apprentice might be doing something just a little bit better, that interaction makes them strive for a lot faster than, say, maybe them working with the lead, because it's almost like expected that the lead is going to be better, and I'm not going to be as good as him. Yeah, and I think if you're in a group of the same age group and you're doing stuff together, as you said, someone kind of will say, well, what if we do this? Yeah. And there seems to be, for some reason, there's a lot more respect there because they're peers. Right. And that's a great way to educate them to start working. It also gets for, working together. Yeah.
So, Norm, you've roughly been doing this for 60 years, and it's interesting sitting here and watching your expressions as we have the conversation that you're still excited about this. And I feel like if you look back at your career, it started with carpentry, and everything has kind of fed off of that carpentry. And I'd be curious to hear kind of what still brings out that excitement after this long, that you're willing, to come after hours and sit down with us and have a conversation, and we're not sending you a check, and you're still excited, and your input, it's incredible, and it's valid and engaging. And I think that I'd like to know, I know there's no secret or anything like that, but you're still very excited about this.
Yeah. My wife says that I have this, this, I don't know what you would call it, but I can't even walk across the room without doing something. Like, I just see things. I'll never be totally retired. I just like doing things,
Yeah.
you know, and whether it's like the other day, I'll give you an example. Totally this has nothing to do with carpentry. I'm down in Rhode Island and I got a line trimmer and I'm trying to start the damn thing up and it won't start. And I have two of them. I have one that's like a 4-stroke and one that's 2 strokes. I look at the 2-stroke and I put the fuel in it, and I've had trouble with this thing before, and I replaced the lines and I'm cranking away at it. And I said, I'm going to get this. There's no way I'm leaving here until I get this thing going. So the web actually helped me on that instance. I went in, typed in one thing, and it said, I said, okay, I'll try that. So I get it in there and I pull the starter and it fires up a little bit. I said, I'm getting someplace now. So for me, it doesn't, whether it's carpentry, I love to fix things and I love problems. You know, I like to, if I run into something, I'm so stubborn to spend money. It's like, I can fix this myself, you know, and I'll do the best I can. And then every once in a while I'll get caught up and I'm thinking, well, this is something I can't fix. I mean, I can't work on cars like I used to because now you got to be a genius to work on some of these cars now. But I hope that answers your question. I mean, I like being challenged, and carpentry is sort of the top of the list. You know, I built all that furniture for New Yankee Workshop. I live with it every day. It's funny, I'm building this shop in Rhode Island, and I said, I'm not going to build a piece of furniture there. I'm going to help my wife. We're going to help her set up. She does pottery as a hobby. She's not a production potter, but she's done it for 30 years. And so I can do some work for her. But there's a museum down in Bristol, Rhode Island called the Hershoff Museum, and they're famous for America Cup boats and everything. But they also have this little boat that they teach kids how to sail on called a 12.5. I'm going to build a 12.5. I'm not going to build a piece of furniture. When I get that shop done, I'm going to build a boat.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
I think that, so do you live in Rhode Island?
No, I have a house. I've had a house, and I was born in Rhode Island. I grew up in Milford, Mass. I live here just a few miles away in Carlisle, Mass. And we bought a house in Tiverton, let's see, when was it? 10 years ago now? 10 years ago. And 10, 11 years ago, an old farmhouse and with some waterfront, had a separate barn that was more newer, but in just studs. Mm-hmm. We just sold that, and we found a beautiful piece of land we've been looking for years. And we've built our, as we call it, aging in place house. And it includes, it's all first floor living for us. It includes a shop for me, a studio for my wife, a garage. And we designed it with an architect that we love, and we're still in process at where we've got occupancy, and I won't be down there full time, at least in the short run. But it built the house this is really what we were looking to build. This is our last house, and it's turning out great.
Will it ever be done, like 100%? Or will it be like us?
I'm determined to get it done. I mean, the only thing remaining now is the shop, which I'm going to actually take some of the tools from the New Yankee Workshop. And there's one piece in the kitchen. It's a pretty good sized cabinet that I'm going to build. And once that's done, then that house will be completely finished. So it'll just be time in the shop. And
don't let your wife hear that, Nick.
If Norm can do it.
Well, usually Carlisle house isn't completely finished.
Thank you for sticking up for me.
That's a completely different house. The house we build is more of an arts and crafts style. It's shingles, and it's a great house. The house I built here is a center entrance colonial with an L off the back that's a timber frame, and then there's another wing that's my office. I built it so that when I sell it, that wing can be like for an au pair. Mm-hmm. So it'll have a little kitchenette.
When did you build that? 80s?
That was 92. 91, 92. So I've been there quite a while.
Yeah.
So there's like the no-go zone, and I don't allow anybody to go and see, because it's all framed and mechanicals are up, but some of the trim work isn't done yet, so and it's kind of holding me back, because I'm ready to sell it, because it really deserves a family. Yeah. And we don't need a house that big for two of us.
And you'll move to Tiverton?
Well, what we'll do, my wife has a huge connection to a pottery school. It's in Somerville, Mass. It's been around forever. And that's a big community thing for her.
Sure.
And if she had to commute from down there, it would be a horror show. So what we're thinking is if we sell that house, we'll probably get a condo someplace in between.
Somewhere
And
on like
then-
top of Dalton or something.
I don't know, someplace where it's
65th floor.
Oh no! I originally I felt like I was going to buy something. I always wanted to live in a city, which I've never lived in. I said I'll live on the waterfront, and then forget that.
Prices now? Should have bought in the Seaport 10 years ago.
Forget that. So it's just someplace to put your head down, and she can have her thing, and you can be close to both places.
So the 12 and a half, is that will that be the first boat you ever build?
No, I did a small boat for the Yankee Workshop. It's called a Clancy, and it was designed by this guy out in Seattle, and it was for kids at risk. And it was a funny story because these kids who are at risk, I mean, these are kids who are really in trouble, in jail and everything. And it was like, you come and learn how to build this sailboat or you're going to jail. And so they built this little sailboat, and it's called a Clancy. And we actually went out to Seattle, and they did a little regatta for us at the lake there, right in the center of Seattle. And I built 2 of those. And it's really meant for one person. It's much better to be just a kid in it, not a. But Steve Thomas was on the show. He was host back then, and we went to a local pond. And we raced. Of course, he beat me badly because he sailed around the world. I'm not a good sailor.
You had a little motor in the back.
I'm
build it.
I'm a power boat guy. But no, it's fun.
Build it. I just can't sail it.
Yeah.
We were away this past weekend up in Maine, and there was a whole group of kids on summer camp who were learning how to sail. I was like, that's so cool.
I know.
Like, my daughters will not be doing that.
Why
They'll be
not?
learning how to work. I need help.
But my kids try to sail, and it's the same thing. You're exposing them to everything, like sports. It's
Let 'em
just
try it.
give it a week,
Yeah.
give it a shot, and if they don't like it, but they had us out that next weekend capsizing us just to show us that they could get the sailboat upright again. It was hilarious. So it's same thing.
So you have kids, Norm?
They're all grown.
Any trades?
I went my first marriage. I inherited 3 kids, and the oldest, Bobby, he went to a technical school, Assabet Valley in Hudson, Mass, and that was a good school for him because it went from, you go in and you got 9 trades you can go into, and you pick 3, and then you go through a year or 2 with those, and then your major, you can move into it in your junior year. And the way they did it there is one of your most important things you had to do was your attendance. The better your attendance was, the better they would let you move forward. And then I think by the time he was a senior, instead of doing 1 week of class work, which was also regular educational work, and 1 week of your whatever your specialty is, he was in electrical, so he would go to work with an electrical contractor instead of being at the school.
Yeah.
So he graduated, joined the service, stayed in that for a couple of years. And he also worked for me when he was, as a kid, he worked for me all the time. Now, he was the one who I would say, I don't want to see you standing around. And one day I left off a job, and one of his best friends I hired too. And I came back, and somebody must have stepped in some white paint, and they were up on the roof. I said, who is up on the roof? You're not supposed to be on the roof. You were supposed to be doing this. And then we couldn't get a dumpster close enough. So I said, all right, all you guys, I got to go do this errand, and I'll give you $100 if you get all that stuff in by the time I get back. It was done. So he's got a business. He does home theater and structured wiring. So he did all my Cat 5 and telephone stuff in the house when he was there. He helped me on the house too. His siblings, him and his mother and I divorced, but his siblings, I don't have anything to do with. They've picked really bad life decisions, and so. But I had a daughter with that wife, and she lives locally. She just got married a couple of years ago. I don't expect her to have any children. Bobby's had a couple. He's had 3 kids. And none of them are in the trades, but actually the youngest just finished his second year at Bentley College, and he's going to Australia for a summer abroad. He's a real smart kid. My daughter was a very good student. She was a good writer. She went to local school here, and then she went to Denison University and lasted about 2 months there. Well, because I met another woman and we had got married, and I don't think she liked the fact there was there was competition. And so I said, she left. I said, all right, well, you're going to have to get a job and so forth. And long story short, after a couple of years, she reapplied for school. She went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, perfect school for her. But when she got out, it was mostly working for a company that, like, if you got a prescription drug thing, it tells you all the things that are going to kill you if you don't use it right. So she hated it. She hated being in a cubicle. So she went to a massage therapy school that started up a second campus here on the eastern part of the state. And now she's certified in the state, certified nationally, works for this woman in locally, and she's into nutrition and stuff. She loves her job, which is all I care about. I said, look, all I care about is if you're happy doing what you're doing. So she married a couple of years ago. Her husband's father used to own one of the lumber yards in Cambridge, but he's not really a builder.
Yeah.
He actually works at a Lowe's. He's a manager in one of the Lowe's. So there's still a little bit of it there.
That's cool.
So I had no sons, no blood sons. So
yeah, it's nice to see too. I feel like it's nice to see a parent who they're not trying to necessarily force their kid to do something or follow their path, and to be able to find happiness in them being content with their life and their career choice, and not necessarily that being a financial decision, I think is very important, especially when it comes to the trades, because it's not often going to be the easiest career, and it's not going to be, again, the most lucrative career. But if you can find happiness in that, I think that there's something to be said for that.
Oh, I think so too. I think that's a really important thing to bring out to them. It's not an easy job. It can be tough, and you can have the ups and downs. I always think that I was always taught that construction industry is really driven by the economy as a whole, and you never know. But I always survived. When we had some downtimes, my guys that I needed to keep, I'd pay them. I wouldn't take a salary if I had to, and I'd make sure I wasn't going to lose them because they were too valuable. But you're right. I think that if you're working just for the money, you're never going to be totally happy.
But I think, Tyler, you've noted it twice now that it's not the most lucrative thing. There's a ton of people that probably make the same or less than us that sit in a cubicle all day.
Sure, but I think as a whole, primarily when parents are raising their children at this point, they're thinking, like, if there was a pool of career choices, getting into the construction field would not be top tier for them. And I feel like a lot of times that's a financial decision, or that it's going to beat up your body or whatever that may be.
True. But I just feel like there's people where, when I've worked for other companies, not as a cubicle, but there's still that doubt and that fear that, let's say the economy spins a different direction, you're the last guy hired, and they just, remember the last recession, the layoffs were crazy. We could still somewhat manipulate and control the scope that we took on and stayed active and kept the employees or whatever. When you are in a cubicle, you're at the mercy of someone in a boardroom. I'm just saying that I know the risk. I get it, but I think there's also risk in the corporate world that you can be.
I also think that, Tyler, you're right in the sense that people look at our industry as not being lucrative, but I would contest that and say it can be very lucrative. It's just you have to put the work in, and I know the point you're trying to make is that, or I think is that, in general, there's other career paths that are quote unquote easier to be more lucrative,
not as risky.
Right? Yeah. To John, your point, not as risky, but the construction industry can be extremely lucrative. You can be, if you're wildly successful, if you're a great builder, if you work for great clients and you're in with great architects. It could be more lucrative than any job out there.
Sure, I guess it's more so median salary that I'm referring to. Coming out of school, what you're going to get paid getting in the industry, and I think there's exceptions to everything, but I feel like as a whole that's a big off-putting factor of what we do, and an issue that we're facing every day.
But the other part of it is that think of how many people have young people have gone to college and have huge debt and they don't have a job.
Right.
So that kind of, if you have nothing, if you have debt and you got to pay all that back,
You're in worse shape.
that's in worse shape. But the other thing is the construction industry, unlike a lot of things everything is getting so automated. It seems like manufacturing is trying to, and even just regular service is trying to automate everything so that they don't need people to do the jobs. And so those people are all going to end up without jobs. But the construction industry is a long time before we're ever going to see that day.
You think so?
I think so. I mean, when you get people talking about, turning the entire country into, net zero, it's not going to happen.
Right.
You can't afford to do it, number one. And that there's always going to be homes and there's always going to be things that are going to have to be repaired. The technology will change. I think it may get very modernized in some sense, but I don't know. I mean, eventually, I think everything starts to get compressed, where you don't need as many people to do it. But I think the construction industry is still pretty strong.
But you just made the point that something's always going to need to be repaired. And if you think, you literally would need to start over, building brand new homes for every single home that exists.
Yeah.
And that's where, the new construction industry, I think there will be some automation that progresses obviously more quickly than the renovation side.
Right.
But the thing is, most of the homes that are being worked on or built are old and they're being renovated. I think there's way more renovations than new construction.
I just think I'm worried that, I think we were on with Kevin and Kevin was like, there's a reason why washing machines, you just throw them out now instead of having them serviced. I think that with the way there's the lack of the trades and lack of what's happening in the value in craftsmanship, that a lot of people, we talk about all the time, people don't know what true craftsmanship is. They can't value it. So when it comes to I had a call just the other day where someone wants to build a new house and they found a beautiful Victorian in Wellesley, and it broke my heart that this was on the chopping block. It was this, my wife and I were sitting there going, this could be renovated. They don't look at it like that's a beautiful piece of architecture. And that's what I think a lot of society is that, I think that could be renovated and manipulated to be how people live in homes today, not as chopped up and whatever. But these people they don't even see it as that. They see it as a lot. They asked me on the phone last night, do you think we could knock it down and then level the lot off more? Their mindset wasn't even, it's got a beautiful slate roof. It's renovations, I think, with the less skilled labor out there will be harder to do. So more people will then turn to knocking it down, and then the automation part comes in when things are panelized, the creativity dies, so everything that we love, speaking for all of us, kind of dies a little bit with it, diminishes, unless you value craftsmanship and you show that value, whether it's mentoring at a school or being on a board or just showing it through our iPhones, through social media, and we can be mentors for that through that little window.
Right.
Norm, have you been to Benson Wood's shop?
Yeah.
And that's it. I feel like this is the fourth time I brought this up on the podcast. Kevin brought it up.
Maybe 5.
Yeah. 6, 7, I don't know. But that, Kevin made the reference about how he wanted to produce a high-end product for a market, a larger market, meaning making it more affordable. And some of the ways they did that was by automating some of the tasks that otherwise were monotonous, like mortising.
Yeah, he brings in a big German machine to do a lot of it.
I think that's where the industry will strive as far as automation. But I think you're absolutely right that it's never going to be totally automated. Building a brand new construction, I think you had sent. Did you send me the concrete printer?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. It's this is going to be our industry.
No, I was just.
And it's spitting concrete out, building a house in 12 hours, which that's cool. Not everyone's going to want.
But do you think people in Detroit said there's no way that they're going to automate our industry, the entire car industry? The people that that were building vehicles.
Do I think people said that?
Yeah,
of course.
So do you think that's us, and then 20 years from now we're going to be like, how did we let this happen?
And maybe I'm retracting something, but I don't believe that we won't eventually be automated.
That's true. Yeah.
In new construction. I don't right now. I can't fathom how you would automate a renovation.
No,
Yeah.
I think people
Like
won't
I'm just
value
picturing
it.
something coming in like like swinging around, demo and everything. And
No,
just
but I just think people will knock it down because they don't value it.
But that's my point. Is that's where I split new construction and renovation.
But then, then you got to think about the economics of the homeowners. You know,
Yeah.
how are they going to afford these houses? I mean, it's already we're at a situation I see now is that.
But if you could print a home in 12 hours.
Well, it's not going to. It's not going to be for zero. I mean, the investment in the equipment that's going to have to. You got to get that money back again. I mean, you know, I was down at this woodworking show, and you look at some of the machines that are there, and you're thinking hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this, but you got to produce a lot of product to pay it off.
Well, look at the cabinet shop in Norwood Metro. They spend I don't even know. I'm making the number up. $1 million on the CNC. All they do is put a stack of plywood beside it, and the arm grabs it, puts it on the machine, picks it up, spits it out, and just does that all day. And it's, you know, I'm calling it $1 million. You spend $1 million, but how many man hours are you saving?
Yeah.
All right, you're saving 0.2 man hours for every sheet, and then okay, that means it's X amount of sheets until we paid for that machine. And it's the same thing. If you're printing, I keep saying, if you print a house in 12 hours, you're printing 2 houses a day. I mean, it's not going to take that long to pay off that machine.
Yeah, but the other economic factor in that is that there's an entire demographic that can't afford to buy a house, tear it down, and rebuild.
Right.
Like most of renovation, you know, especially where I'm from, people are getting their foot in the door with the house and biting off one room at a time and renovating the house over the course of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And I think that, again, like you guys are in this hotbed where a lot costs $1 million and the people have money to then tear it down and build something new, but that's not 95% of the country.
The more we talk about that on the podcast, the more I want to move somewhere where I don't pay, where the market isn't, just I can.
But you can go to a different town. In Massachusetts, like Tyler's example, you can just go somewhere else in Massachusetts, and that market can fluctuate. But I think my point was that these people forget about the value of what they have for assets. It was just the fact that they didn't recognize craftsmanship.
Sure.
That's what made me sad. It was like, man, it's creeping in. I feel like it's just getting closer where it's like, how do you not see that that's a beautiful house? And that's what I feel like the bigger problem is, that then that house that can be printed in 24 hours may not have any details at all. That's what makes it affordable.
Yeah.
Like there's houses that get built now that have an attic that's finished and it's just square footage, where you could have made that vaulted and poured in all the finished amount of money that was up there into craftsmanship downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, we talked about this 100 times. It's just how people use the value, but people just want square footage. It's like, you know, a biggie bag at Wendy's. They just want all that food. They don't care.
And you got people now who are this contractor that I've been working with down. They do a lot of big projects. Ours was probably a small one compared to most. And one of the project managers showed me the plans of this house that's going to be built in Newport. 15,000 square feet for 2 people.
And it's probably a dog. Probably a dog mixed in.
Can we talk about the guy that got Norm's project? Like, imagine that. I'm going to look at a new job.
I would say no.
And Norm walks in, and you're just like, wait a minute.
Post-it notes over everything.
Well, I will
How
tell
are
you.
you
I'll
as a
tell you. I'll
customer?
tell you that it was a really good experience, the whole thing, because we had the producer had actually interviewed this guy for a possible This Old House project that fell through. And when I was looking around, and actually there's a project going around in the neighborhood, same guy, hadn't done a lot of work in that area. So I said, let's go see something. So I called up and talked to one of his sons and said, can you show me, I want to see a couple houses that you're doing, but not finished, like 80% finished, 70% finished. I don't want to see it completely finished. So he took us to 2 projects, beautiful homes.
Sorry, when you called, did you introduce yourself or just say that you're a prospective client?
No.
Okay.
Well, first I talked to them, and then my producer, she left This Old House, and she was always good at, you know, checking these people out. Mm-hmm. So she said, you met him? And I said, where? And she said, well, remember the house and property? I said, that was like a 45-minute meeting. And it was Tommy and I walked through this house and said, we can't do this. And then we found out that the college was like a slum landlord, so we didn't want to get into that mess. So we went and we looked at it and so forth, and I just had made a commitment. I wanted to go to his office. So he has an office, and it's a big outfit. I mean, it's not so much that he has an army of subcontractors that are top notch. So let's go to his office. So my wife and I, we drive down, we pull into his office, and I look out the office and I go, overhead. Overhead. She said, what do you mean? I said, this thing's going to have overhead.
Yeah.
But you get what you pay for, ultimately, in the end. So we went in and we had a meeting, met one of his producers. His VP, this woman, actually the manager on our project, his sister is the VP in the company. The guy that's in the project has been with him forever. He was getting ready to retire. He came back on board to do the project. And
yeah, I'll do
so
that. Yeah.
He came
sign
back
me up. Don't even pay.
It was fun because, we went through the plans. We had the architect wanted a team experience. So we had a meeting where the architect is this guy, Sally DeGarn. She's done several of this old house projects. She's a great architect. She's got this guy, Nathan, who works with her. He's great. He's going to be a good architect. And so we had a meeting. It was Sally, Nathan, my wife, me, the GC, the owner, his son, the engineer who did all the CRMC regulations, and a friend of ours who's probably going to do most of the landscape. So we're sitting there. Sally goes, we're going to start at the footing and we're going to go up all the way through this house because I have a lot of questions. So we start coming up, and the questions start coming. Glenn, who's the owner, gives his opinion. I give my approach. And after about 5 or 6 of those, I said, this is the guy I want to work with.
Yeah.
He thinks like I think. He knows what he's talking about. We're going to go with him. So ultimately, we start the project, and everything moved along very smoothly. And every time, I never told them when I was going to show up. So I just drive in this house. And they'd have a list of questions that they wanted, or how I wanted things treated. And they got so good at it that they started to, so we'd go down the list, and they loved it because, unlike a regular homeowner who probably doesn't have any idea, they got to get the architect there or whatever. They loved the architect because she would respond so quickly. He said, we got architects that wait a week before they call us back. These people call back in an hour, and if they can't talk, they'll call us the next day. The building department said it was the best set of plans they had ever seen. So they'd come in and
Everyone bringing their A game for
Yeah.
Norm.
checking. This one girl who works in the builder's office in that town. She's my pal. So we'd say, no, I'm not sure about that yet. Yeah, I want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. So, 3 or 4 months into the project, I come down and the one guy, he's semi-retired, so he's there 3 days a week, and then they had another guy would be there the whole week. Always had the way they do their jobs is once the manager gets on that project, he never leaves, not even if there's a project next door.
That's
so
awesome.
they go and I come in and they'd say, what do you want to do about this? And I tell him, and Joe, the manager, goes, see, I told you that's what he was going to say. I said, you guys don't need me to come here anymore. You got me all figured out now, so you can just make the decisions and just pay the bills. So it's been a really good experience. And meeting the subcontractors on the job was great. The sidewall shingle guy, when I first saw him, first time I walked in, he had just started shingling these Alaskan yellow cedar shingles that we used on the house. And he does really good work. And first thing he said to me is, what's your tolerance underneath the window sills for spacing? I said, well, it's controlled by, I have no choice controlling it because it's controlled by the top. I said, but as far as shingles go, I said, no less than 2/3 exposure. So but what he does, very clever, he takes a piece of yellow cedar that we had and he makes a piece and then he puts kerfs in it so it looks like the shingles. You can't even tell. It's just a simple thing like that. But when I walked in the first time with my wife and he's all excited, and I said, yeah, it looks good. He said, I guarantee these shingles won't blow off the house for 60 years, and he's giving me all these guarantees. And I said, but there is a problem. He goes, what? I said, you're wearing a Yankees hat.
Well
and,
played.
he never had it on every time I came back after
It's
that.
amazing.
But one day I had a conversation with him totally off-cuff conversation with him, and learned that this guy was highly educated, and he could do multiple jobs, but he decided, I love doing this. I got a good crew. I'm going to do one house at a time. I don't want to have the hassle of doing 2 or 3 houses at the same time. And so you get the high quality work out of it. He did and then we had a different guy do the roof, but that was kind of the model. Almost all the GCs, the trim guy, he was really good. This guy, Warren, there was everybody there that they were really good. Very few things that I, would say. I did have one thing happen. So they started making the casings for around the windows, and I show up one day and I'm walking around the house, and there's one window in the master bedroom, and they prefabricated. They were prefabricating them inside and then putting them on, and they had caulked the top one, and they did a crummy job. And so I go back to the manager and I said, the guys are doing a really good job, but I just saw a window over there that I'm not happy about. I said, and I'm fussy. And he goes, okay, we'll take care of it. So I think that set a good pace moving forward, so that...
That was it?
That was it, yeah. They took care of it, fixed it, and we just had a couple things. Like the other day, we were looking at the house, and there was one shingle on the roof that, I don't know why, there was wood shingle. We have some wood shingle and some standing seam. And it had popped up for some reason. And I said, you got to fix that shingle. And so one of the shingle guys was there the other day, and I climbed up there and fixed it. But very, very short punch list.
That's
Wow.
funny.
Yeah.
I feel like, what do you think the percentage that they put on to be like, all right, this is our standard percentage of dealing with tolerances with customers. We're going to be building a house for Norm Abrams. Like, what's that percentage going to be?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like it could go two ways. It's like either you're covering yourself for all the additional work, or you're just gonna do it because it's Norm.
Yeah.
I
I also
well,
feel like,
I also did what I did with this project is, we didn't have enough stuff picks to get a hard bid in the beginning, and I trusted this guy, and I think it worked to my benefit in the long run. I said, I'll do cost plus.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me exactly what they're going to mark it up. And every month I got a fully detailed sheet of every single thing, even the pump out for the porta potties, everything was on there.
yeah.
And I never questioned them in the whole project. And I think I think that was a good move to do because, and Tommy, that's the way he does most of his projects. You can't do a job like that and give an accurate price. Either that, you're going to price it so high to cover yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I didn't think we'd go down this road, but that's a question we actually get a lot: cost plus fixed fee, and then fixed cost or GMP.
Yeah.
But people ask us all the time, what is better? What should I be doing? And it sounds like you do have a pretty solid opinion on that.
yeah, and I mean, all the years I worked, back then, I probably would have to sign a contract these days, but I never signed a contract in my life. Everything I built just on trust.
You signed up for this old house and got on mic'd up in a camera without signing anything.
No, I didn't. I didn't then.
I know.
I got
That's what I mean.
right.
You started with this old house and created.
Have you signed a contract since?
Oh yeah, I have a contract. But it's funny. I was thinking about costs when I was working with my father. I was like, I think I got up to like $350 an hour, and then I found this, bulletin board thing and went to work for this company, and I got $350, and I was like, wow, that's great. And then you got a salary, and you're thinking, it's not too bad. And the best deal I had with that company was one of the condo places we built. They owed me bonus money, so I ended up getting most of I didn't have to put a down payment on. I got a condo up in ski country, and I used to rent it out in December and pay the mortgage for the whole year. It was great.
That's awesome.
How long of a build was your home?
We bought the land in June of 2016. I'm sorry, we bought June 2016. We didn't even have a house designed yet. We had just ideas, so we had to go CRMC. A lot of engineering for the site, had a high water table. So we broke ground it'll be April 2017. Yeah, 2017. No, 17. No, I'm sorry, 2018.
It's a little over a year.
19 months. It took us 19 months. I get occupancy in March or late March.
Okay. And you said it's complete with the exception of what you're working on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they tweaked all the systems. Everything's up and running.
Did you film any of it?
No.
Was
A
there
lot of pictures. I have a lot of pictures.
Was there any consideration for it, or
No.
Yeah.
Even when I built the other house, Russ wanted to film my house. We did shoot one scene there,
Yeah.
and I said, no, I don't want my house on TV.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I wrote a book about the building of my house in Carlisle. I got the contractor gave one of the managers had a drone the other day, so he gave me some drone shots,
Nice.
which were great.
It's funny. It's funny that he's giving the drone shots, not anyone that works in this building. Is just there filming it.
Who are you going to hire to finish the trim in your existing house?
Me. I'm too cheap to hire somebody
Come
to
up.
do that.
John, you have a list of questions over
No,
there.
I had all my stuff in here that just was. He touched on most of it. I think the only question I had that was it's not a shot at you, Nick, but your old business card.
No, go for it.
Like I feel like my entire life I was a carpenter. I always strive to become a master carpenter and don't know what like the criteria is to like even know.
So a small backstory to this is when I had my cards made, the first thing I did in my business, I was a carpenter since I was a kid, but when I started my own business, I wanted to put a heavy emphasis on my brand and my image and who I look, what our company looked like. It was just me at the time. And the company I worked with put Nick Schiffer, owner and master carpenter, on the card. I didn't ask for it. And he's like, what do you think? I'm like, it looks awesome. I'm like, I just don't know if I'm a master carpenter. He's like, I looked it up. There's no really regulation, so you're good. And I'm like, all right, print them. And every time I handed them out, people were like, what does that mean? And then he saw it. He's like, are you sure you're a master carpenter?
Because my entire life I'm like, I don't know. I've always taken the approach that I
You
don't
would be
know
like,
enough.
I think Norm Abrams is master carpenter. I don't know about you.
Okay, that's it.
Well, I think even when Russ made that my title, because it's a TV show and he had to give me some kind of a title, I don't think it means that you've got there and there's no place else to go. It's just an attitude of doing good work.
I like
I
that.
wish I had that answer.
Right?
Yeah.
That's solid.
It's just my attitude.
That makes sense.
I like that.
Put it back on.
Yep.
Switching it.
I
But I think so. Jeff Harvey, up in Canada,
Yeah.
like they have, at least outside looking in, awesome apprenticeship programs up there, and like the schooling and the way you go through, the years and the training and the hours and all of that. Where down here, for a plumber and electrician and HVAC, that is the norm, but from pun
You
intended.
had to put the hours in.
But carpentry, I don't think it's just not the same here.
No.
And I think that, bringing it back to school is kind of step one, but establishing what it means to be an apprentice and how you get to that next level. And even like from internally in my company, that's one of the biggest things I'm working on right now is, what each role really means. And what are your tasks? What are you expected, and how, what could your pay rate be, and how do you get to that next step? Because having that outline and having those steps, makes it more achievable. When you're just working and wondering, I wonder if I'll ever get a raise, or am I doing a good job, or am I doing what, they're expecting of me?
Or that you want to do. I mean, I think apprentice should just kind of stand for the exploring, because if you're an apprentice, you're starting from ground zero. And our guys now that we've had on, I was talking to Nathan because I spent a lot of time with him when we went out for this event. And he said, what's your goal? He's his father's cabinet installer and they do trim work and everything. And he said, I'm still trying to figure that out. His skills are good. He can, you kind of got to get to that point. And then you say, okay, where do I want to go from here? Do I want to just be a carpenter? Do I want to have a small business? But I still want to work with my hands. And that's kind of seems what I'm hearing from him right now. He's saying, I don't want to go big. I love to do the work. So what I'd like to do is try to figure out a way. So he's he's sort of coming out of that apprentice thing, and he had more experience anyway to start out with, but he's kind of trying to figure out where that goes. So I think, it's like a apprentice, journeyman, master is kind of the way most people put it. And that's more, actually the contractor who's doing the Rhode Island project, and one of our salespeople, he was supposed to go out to Chicago, and they were going to talk to some of the unions. Well, here we don't have carpenter unions in residential construction, so you don't have that list. But even in Richard, his family, everybody goes apprentice, journeyman, and you don't have to be in the union to do that. We just, I think in carpentry, we don't really talk about it too much. I think it's just, apprenticeship is where you start, and from that you sort of work your way into the other areas. I don't think there's a place where you say, I've now completed my apprenticeship. I think it's just
But do you think that, so I think my struggle with that is that there's no, knowing what it takes to get to that next step.
Yeah.
Where, when you don't know, how long am I an apprentice for? And I had the conversation with one of my guys, and it wasn't even, it wasn't like, hey, when will you stop calling me an apprentice? It was more like, so how long does it, is this apprenticeship? When do I become a carpenter? And I didn't have the answer.
Did he say, you actually answered it, but I wonder if that was more wage related or like title related, like knowledge wise.
It was just, I don't think it really was either. It was just curiosity. Like, you call me one of your apprentices, but what makes me not an apprentice? Like, when will you stop saying that? And I was like, I don't know. Like, when I think you're done being an apprentice. And that's what I'm getting at, is having, kind of setting these milestones. It doesn't have to be, hey, 1,200 hours, you're no longer an apprentice. It's, no, you have completed XYZ for X amount of time, and your skill level says that you could now be into this tier.
So maybe it's like your skill level is now at the level that you can kind of move ahead on your own. You're not having to look back and say, well, what do I have to do next? It's like, and from a builder, as a builder, that apprentice working for you, I think he moves out of apprentice when you can trust him to be him or her to be on the job doing what they're supposed to do in the interest of the company.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Norm. You had mentioned earlier in the podcast that when the company you were working for wanted to hire you as a manager, but you wanted to remain in the field and you wanted to work with your hands. At what point in your career did that switch, and was it a decision that you made because your body was failing, because you needed to make more money, because it was just the next step in the progression of your business?
Well, I never really put the hammer down ever until the very, very end, when I was working with this old house, because my company did what Tom Silver was doing the first few years. So when they, so what you're saying is like, when they said, well, we want you in the office to manage the managers, that wasn't appealing to me. Mm-hmm. I felt fine. And I think I just, it was about working with the tools. I don't know if there was anything, maybe I'm not quite getting.
I guess I feel like, so I wear a tool belt every day, and I'm still in the work, and I'm performing a lot of the work. I have one full-time employee, and that's what I enjoy, and that's why I got into this. And everyone's always asking, at some point you're going to hang up the tool belt and you're going to have to start managing more, or, for the growth of your company's sake. And if there was a point that it got to that with you where it was like, all right, now I need to transition from being in the field every day to managing people or running the business.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, I think because the opportunity for that to happen in that way wasn't going to happen for me, because I was still putting the belt on every day right up until the time that I got this job, which the only way we could do it was as a project management job. Mm-hmm. And back then it was only commercial work done that way. And I took my two top guys and I put them on the job site, because I was now doing the new Yankee Workshop and I was doing this old house. So I was still putting the tools on at this old house, and I was still in the workshop, but I wasn't building on the site. And then when that came to an end, when that job came to an end, My top guy who I had ended up working for the client, who was a commercial real estate developer. And the other guy that I had, who we hired on this old house as well, whose father used to supply unroadworthy trailers for storage, construction storage. And he had just got out of one of the schools. So he was a laborer, and he worked all the way up, and he's a contractor now. So I never came to that point where I didn't put the tools down necessarily. A funny thing you mentioned that is this house in Rhode Island I just sold, the barn, all the double hung windows they were in tough shape. The sills were rotted. The glazing was all gone. And I was hearing when inspections, they were saying, that's a negative. So I said, all right, I'll just get sash kits and I'll redo the windows. So I'm working there one day, and my real estate agent, who's a friend, she comes to the job, she comes to the house, and she looks in the barn, and she looks at me, and I had my tool belt on and everything. She goes, so you really do this stuff? And he said, here it is. I still put it on.
Yeah, seriously. Don't you think you could
So
hire?
I never got to the point where I had to totally give it up, I guess, is what happened to me. So I can't really answer it in that respect.
How about, I can't imagine when you got into this that you foresaw the path that your career has kind of taken. I don't think that you got into the trades thinking this is what I'm going to be doing.
No.
Had this not had happened, where do you think your career would have been?
I think I would have left off with that when we got into being managers of high-end projects and putting it together, figuring out how to get everybody there and do a high-quality work, high-quality customers. I wanted work. I wanted really challenging work is what I wanted. I remember one client I had. It's a strange house, and they came in and they said, we want to open up all this space. Can you do that? And I kind of joked around and said, you got some money, I can do anything.
Yeah.
And but that's not true. You still have to know how to do it. And I didn't like doing simple projects. The more complicated it was, the better it was for me.
So you would have taken that management route.
Yeah, I would have. But I probably would have had to give up the belt, at some point.
It's funny, you had mentioned Nathan and asking what he wanted to do, and you had said that he replied saying, well, I don't want to be too big because I want to wear the tool belt. And I remember saying that. And just a few years ago, how I don't want this to be a big company. I want to be able to be in the field with my guys working every day. And when I started hiring talented young guys that were essentially replacing what I was doing, there was this gratification with that I started liking building the business and the team more than I did the tools. But John always says it's like he just wants to be like Tom Silva and wake up every day and choose to wear the tools or to boss people around. And I think ultimately that is my goal, is to wake up and dedicate, or not even dedicate, just wake up and be like, what, I'm gonna frame walls today with the guys.
Yeah.
Or what, today I'm gonna work on building the business, or I'm gonna go interview some new clients.
Yeah.
And just being able to have that freedom. But it's where right now I've 100% put the belt down. I haven't had the belt on in 2 years since I've been hiring people.
Yeah.
But it's the ultimate goal of having that freedom. But I think I'm, in a way, I feel as though I'm lucky because I've really balanced the business and the tools where I like both equally.
Well, Tommy, if you talk to him, he loves doing all this stuff. And I think when he got Charlie up to the point where Charlie could manage the business, he just didn't want to have to sit in meetings with clients who were complaining about how much it costs and all that. I think that's what Tommy just wanted to get away from. And there was a little tricky period, where he was like, am I going to stay with this old house? What do I want to do? And I think what he decided to do was, he thought, well, you can get another contractor and I'll still be willing to come in and do stuff. And that wasn't going to work. And I think the solution was, all right, I've been in this business. I grew this company with my brother and so forth, and Charlie, and he can take that, and I'll be there if he needs me, but I don't want to have to meet with clients and figure out all that stuff. I just wanted to build. That's who he is.
And that's the goal. I just don't know how long it's going to take. I think your example of having great employees and seeing what they can do also happens with subs.
Absolutely.
Like when I used to wear a tool belt, like I always say it, like joking, like my hammer is now my, my finish guys. It's Sean. It's not a hammer. It's like each guy that it's like when you find your favorite tool, it's the same as your favorite tradesman. That's what you have, and then doing that, I'm gonna work my butt off to make clients happy and build those relationships, and then still try and have a signature beyond what we build as character and quality, but having something that I physically still do. Right. That's kind of the end all be all, like when it's the perfect scenario. But I just don't know if it's not always that easy.
No, I don't think it's easy. I think it's a great.
What's your time frame though? Like, have you put a time frame on when do you think you could put the tool belt back on?
Have I?
Yeah.
No. If you're asking me now, less than a year.
Really?
I mean, I'll go on record.
So I got a question I want to know. How old are you guys?
31.
33.
39, turning 40 next month.
Wow. So I got in this old house, I was 29. I'll be 70 in a couple months.
So I missed my opportunity. 2 years.
So did you keep the company
I kept
active?
it for, yes, because, we started my company was active through the first 9 years of the show because we were there my guys did the work on the sites.
What was the name of the company?
I originally started out, it was Integrated Structures, but after it was Lenore Inc.
Okay.
Lenore is my daughter's first three letters of her. Her name is Lindsay, and Nor is my N-O-R,
Nice.
Lenore Inc.
So you kept that through. So how many seasons? Sorry.
Actually, I still have that company. I use it. I funnel my TV income through it.
Oh, that's cool.
You got to set up a.
Use it
save
for
money.
trade accounts to get discounts on material.
to buy glazing.
I'm
and
buying window treatments from Hunter Douglas. Yeah, you need my trade name?
So they ran with that company for the first few seasons?
The very first season, Russell Morash came in, and it was just, I always joke about it and say it was just a bunch of gypsies. We didn't know each other. Russ just picked these people out. I don't know where they were. A couple carpenters who came on the job, we knew they weren't going to do very well because they couldn't figure out how to do the hip on the porch, and we're like, oh man, who do we get here? And then the second project, we had some good people working there. Like I say, two of them ended up working for me for a long time.
Who was the host?
Vila was the host in the beginning.
Did he know that?
Did he know?
Like you said, the second episode you had a mic put on you and you were going to go explain it. Was it already set? Was it already in stone saying, "Hey"?
That was all Morash. It was his show, and he was going to run it the way he wanted it.
No, but did Bob know?
He didn't know me.
No, but did he know he was the host?
Yeah, in fact, recently in an interview he made a comment which was very strange. He said, "I didn't know I was going to become a national broadcaster," and we went, "Well, what is that?" No, Bob was more of a developer.
Okay.
I did some work on one of his buildings he did condos on a building in Boston on Marlborough Street, and I never knew another job in Boston. It was like you have to put a budget up where you have to, for your parking and tickets alone.
I'm in Boston. Most of our projects are in Boston.
I did enough in Boston. So he was a kind of more of a real estate, he was a developer more than a builder. He had a few people working for him. And I was already established. So, and then Tommy, they asked Tommy at the beginning, but Tommy's like, I got plenty of work. And Tommy's dad was still alive. And so that's why Tommy got picked. The reason Tommy came into play was because Russ came up with this idea of the new Yankee Workshop. So when that came up, I couldn't be in two places at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I had landed this big job that was the management job. It was through actually the clients. We had done a job for the client's Mercedes dealer, and he recommended us to him, and then we ended up getting the job.
So you were doing New Yankee Workshop, This Old House, and running your own?
Well, I had this kid, Ed Zielinski, who I put on the site as the manager. He was the key to that. He had been with me from this second This Old House project, and I made him my project manager. He's really smart.
And he was
he was on the site. He was on the site every day, And back then, we created our own paperwork to track every contractor who came into the job every day, how long they were there, how many guys were there. I mean, that stuff didn't even exist then. It was kind of new.
Mm-hmm.
And then this kid, the other guy that I had, he kind of filled in the gap for, like you say, the plumber needs to have a stud moved or something. He could fill that in. And then we subbed everything out. And we even brought the client wanted painters from England to come over because he knew them. And so we had these guys, they were so neat and clean. It was amazing. But the project just kept going and going and going because he was one of these. And actually, one of the contractors besides Tommy, who did some work, was a local contractor. I hired him to do some of the work on that project too. He does a lot of millwork stuff. So, but for me, I was just checking in every once in a while and billing the customer.
Mm-hmm. And you kept your role involved with this old house on the show with Bob Vila. And then
Bob Vila. Then when Bob left after season 9, and that was Tommy's first season.
Season 9?
Season 9 was Tommy's first season. And so at that point, he took over, and his guys were doing the work. My guys were working on this big project, and then they kind of went on their own after that. Mm-hmm. And then I was primarily working. I was still on house, but I was doing the workshop show, which took most of my time.
So you said that your first job on your own was in Nantucket?
Well, first job I did with the guy that I had hooked up with. Yeah, first. That company was called Integrated Structures. That was the name of the first company.
And how old were you at that point?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember the project. Remember that we built that building. Was it 20 years later? We did one in Nantucket. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I got out of college in '71, and
it's like 25. Maybe you said you were 29.
Yeah, around 25.
So where, starting your company, where were these leads coming from? And you seem to have been doing pretty high-end work right off the bat.
Well, that first lead I got for that store that we built in Nantucket came from the company I had been working for.
Okay.
So I worked for them for 3 years. That's right. I worked for this company, the company from Boston, for 3 years, and then I left. So then they referred me, after I did the Nantucket project. The Nantucket project was referred to me by them. We were doing a few jobs out in Western Massachusetts, mostly renovation work. And then that came up. And then once we started that, Jim and I did that job. And we got it done in time. And then he said, well, I live in Western Mass. I don't want to be in the East.
Let me pause you for 1 sec, and I just want to make sure I have it correct. So originally that company you were working for, doing the management, they were going to do the project on Nantucket.
Yeah,
and you said no to it when you worked for them.
They wanted me to go manage it.
Right.
And I said no because I had plenty of work at that time.
Things slowed down, and then they connected you directly
I connected them again, and I said, whatever happened to that project? Did you initiate it?
But they didn't remain involved. They said, oh, he's on the floor below.
Right. They said, go talk to the architect.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure I have that.
That's how I got into that one. And then from there, I did a couple projects on my own. I hired a couple guys and built a couple new houses, did some renovations, and then we got a little bit more into some really critical renovations, like some really nice. We did one in Brookline that was really nice. It was a fire, had a fire, and the guy wanted rock lath and full coat plaster job on it. He's just, I don't know why he wanted it, but we said, that's what you want, that's what you get. So we did some pretty nice jobs in the city all around the area for a while, and then we got this big one. That we had fixed a turret for this guy who was a Mercedes dealer, and he had sold a car to the guy who was going to do the big job we did. It was a big brownstone, 10,000 square foot brownstone renovation.
Wow. Do you think you attribute the fact that you were referred by your previous employer because of your work ethic or your attention to detail or quality? I think that's kind of getting back to Tyler's question, to get right into this and to, I'm dumbing this down, but skip over the simple stuff and wanting to work over the challenge, want to work on more challenging and more detailed. I mean, I find myself in that position where I want more challenge. I want higher end. I want bigger I want bigger problems to solve.
Yeah, I think the people I had been working for, when I first got out of college, then they were doing this fabrication system of their own. I think they saw from us, there was a couple of us who were managing the projects, that referral helped us move forward, because we were taking care of. I mean, they were in the office sitting in Boston, and we were in Vermont freezing ourselves off. And I remember that back then they had a teletype. They used to send us stuff. And one day, one of the managers.
Teletype. What is a teletype?
You don't know what a teletype is? No. It's like a machine. It sends letters to you. It types them up. They run it over the telephone line.
So on your end, it just types out a letter?
No, so the guys in the office, like
we're totally digressing, but I need to know.
The VP would say, he'd send us he went, well, you guys aren't moving fast enough. You know, what's going on up there?
And it would just print out on your end?
It would print out on our end. Yeah, you had these little machines in the trailer, in the construction trailer.
That's amazing.
What's that?
That's amazing. Like, I want one. Set them up on all the jobs.
So it was in the trailer. So that one day, one of the managers sends us this really nasty note. It's like, how come you guys aren't moving faster? So we wrote, and then this would be public information because anybody could grab it off the teletype. So this guy, he was a friend of mine. He was the other manager. So we wrote back, if you guys think you can do it better than we can, you can come up here and do the job. Well, the phone rang 2 minutes later. What are you talking? Don't give us grief like this. We're doing the best we can do. And we kind of just shut him down and said, you guys have got it too easy sitting in the office in Cambridge. And so that kind of settled us down. But we weren't going to take any grief. We were killing ourselves on those jobs. It was so cold, and we were working there. And then when they said that was the second project, because it was Butternut Hill. I remember it was in Vermont. I just ran into a guy who said, you did Butternut Hill up in Vermont, didn't you? I said, yeah. So it was 5 buildings. And I had one lead guy on every building, and then they had like 3 carpenters each. And I ran one of them myself as I was doing management at the same time. So we were like competing against one another. And we had a lot of fun.
Sounds like fun.
Those are the best
to be honest.
Yeah.
So thinking back, whether it was in the show or in your own company, I always like to ask, like, is there one project or one thing that sticks out in your mind that you wish you could go back and change?
To be quite honest, that question I get asked a lot.
Really?
Yeah, it's not very original. Sorry.
No. But I will say,
I asked him earlier.
I will say that I know it's the same answer I've always given when that question gets asked. I came to a lot of forks in the road, that's for sure. But I don't regret any of the ones any choices I made and I don't regret having not gone in another way. I never even looked in the other way. I think the choices I made as to do, to become on my own and do that and do the kind of work I did, and even to be willing to jump into this stupid TV show idea, it was unheard of. And I figured, I got nothing to lose. Little that I know, 40 years later, I'd still be here with it, connected to it. But truthfully, I don't regret any of the decisions, any of the pathways that I went on.
I think I asked that question wrong, because I don't necessarily mean in career, like, do you think you regret anything? But for me, I always think about, there's this one project I did years ago, and I look back wishing I could just show up at their front door and be like, hey, let me redo this, because I've learned so much in my career that the way I did that was just wrong. And I don't know if I feel psychotic thinking about it, because like I feel like everyone could probably do that on multiple jobs. But there's just one specific one that I just always wish I could go back.
I think I was always pretty satisfied with, I think we did the best possible work we could, and we never had a lot of issues with clients. I mean, I had one client who, you always have to get one in your career. We had done a renovation. They ended up, this is what they should never do. They bought like the Whirlpool tub for the bathroom, and it got put in, and the tub had a fault in it. And they came after me, and I said, you bought it, you own it. I'm not taking any responsibility. And they said, well, we're going to sue you. And I said, go ahead, try. And they backed off. And I had one guy, this was interesting. This was an employee, well, not necessarily an employee. This big job we did, the last job we did, guy comes in with a backhoe and he's moving some material around, and he lifts some timbers with chains on the Bobcat, and he worked for another contractor. We had a subcontractor. He worked for a subcontractor who I knew. He put the chain on the machine. He put the chain around the wood, and it failed, and he got hurt. So he comes after me and the homeowner. And I said, why are you coming after me? You don't work for me, even though I was and I had already got out of the job. There was just a little bit left, but I still had I was still letting dumpsters be on the site, and there was some things that I was still paying for. So they come after me, and then the lawyers they're trying to say, you're going to do this. I said, we didn't do anything. It's why are you coming after me? And then so finally it disappeared. Basically, we didn't have to cost us any money. It was a ridiculous requirement anyway. I get down to Savannah for one of this old house projects, and who's running the job?
No.
That same guy.
Wow.
And it never got talked about.
Really?
No, we just I almost didn't even want to have to talk to him, but I knew I couldn't do that. That he came after me because he was looking for the insurance money.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And try to fake a disability, which he didn't really have.
Wow.
That would have been awkward.
Yeah.
Just a tiny bit.
I had to watch the episode to see the interactions.
I don't. I hope most of my customers were satisfied.
No, I don't.
I guess you always think. I don't know. I guess I can't really come up with one and say, "Geez, I wish I had done that differently."
Yeah.
Maybe in my own house, I would have made it.
I want to tear down my house.
I would have made it 2 feet wider because
Yeah.
the stair was a little tight. But
I feel like it's always. I know next time I'm gonna do a better job, and I know when I'm done, I'm gonna be like, I wish I did this. I wish I did that. And I think that's just the nature of being in the industry, and
well, Tom
build
Silver and
your
I
own
have
home.
this whole thing about details, and there's so many houses built these days that don't have a lot of good details inside and out. And our best friends came down to the house in Rhode Island, and they were sitting there the first time they had seen it, and they were looking around, and they said, wow, this house has really interesting details. And it's not like over-the-top stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys who worked on the project, they've worked on insanely unbelievable homes. And they said, we like this house so much better because it's got nice details. It's very simple. It's got a nice flow to it. And, it's not gigantic. And that was our goal, is to have just little things because for me, I just can't, even when my wife's studio, when we were going to do the casings in her window it's a pottery studio. So he said, well, just do square edge, we'll paint it. And then I said, no, wait a minute. I did a detail in my other house. Let's just chamfer the edges on both sides of the casing and make just do that little detail. And we did it. And I'm glad we did it because it's those little things that maybe no one else cares about it, but I do.
No, but it looks well thought out.
Yeah.
And that's we talk about that too. It's not necessarily something that needs to be, brought to your attention.
No.
But when you look at it, it's just pleasing.
Yeah.
It just feels better. It looks better. It appears as though there was more than one thought, that went into.
Do you find
doing.
clients have a hard time? I know a lot of them let the designers and the architects drive the bus, so to speak, and that's exactly the opposite of what we did. We sort of drove the bus. And as a homeowner, because I'm in the trade, I think I obviously have an advantage, but still picking things like lighting and paint colors was really hard to do.
Yeah.
I let my wife do all of that. I don't make those decisions. Just labor.
I let her do this. I let her do the colors. I don't really care too much about that. But the lighting, I had certain ones that I was like, not sure about that.
There's so many decisions that go into it,
Yeah.
and you do it on a daily basis for your job, and then oftentimes you'll get heated with the customer. Just make a decision. It's a light, and then you do it for your own house, and you're like, all right, this is a lot more work, and there's a lot more coming together, especially if you're not familiar with that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I really like the design side of it, and I have to work with designers that are okay with that because I've worked with ones that don't want me weighing in or giving my opinion. But it's fun when they can propose something, but we can work together. And usually I'm trying to take what they're designing and say, can I make it a little cooler? Or can I do this detail or include this to make it, what you're, designing, just a little bit next level.
Do you find that the architect or the designer have more influence on the project than the owners, because most owners really
Yes.
don't really know what they want?
Yes.
I would say so.
Especially if they're paying for it. I mean, I can think of one project where they were paying for an interior designer, and they pulled me aside and said, "I'm paying her to make decisions, and she's coming to me asking me everything. Like, what? Am I in the wrong here? I thought the point was that she would bring this all together and we would walk in and love it." And that was
See, I think that's what a
conversation.
designer should do.
Sure.
That's the way our design. We did very little work with the designer, but it was like, this is what we want. What do you think? Does it work for you? Does it work for us? Do you have a better idea?
Agreed. That it was, what do you want?
Yeah. What do you want? Yeah. It's like
What kind of pillow do you want for that couch?
why did
Do I have
hire
any
you? Why
options?
did I
No,
hire-
no. What have you seen at this? That's the direction it was
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
I feel like architects, a lot of them are so busy right now that they don't go through the whole process with the client. Like, so we talked about it in the past where there's a lighting design in the drawings. I'll just have to just double check with the client to be like, did you actually go over this layout? Like, where everything's going, like around your bed? Do you light down lights? Do you know, like all that? And I find that a lot of stuff is just maybe cut and paste from other projects, like fireplace details. Like, is that the fireplace box you want, or is that just what they just cut and paste from the last job? And I find that influence is there, and a lot of GCs would probably just run with the drawing. But I kind of just always just do that double check one last time. And I do think that a lot of architects just run with it, and the client may not know what they want.
Right. And there's some homeowners who they want exactly that. They want the architect to run the whole thing. But I've seen examples of that where the architect runs with it and then the client isn't happy. Well, you can't have it both ways.
Then whose fault is it?
I think
Like, it's always ours.
to answer your question, at least in my experience, I'm 33, and as long as I've been doing this, most of our customers don't know what they want. So they're coming to us to help facilitate that. And usually it's a general aesthetic, but then it's coming with options, putting options on the table for them. And I feel like the homeowners very rarely drive the decisions in a project.
Do you find that makes it harder to price things out when they're not quite sure what they're...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally what we do is try and sort kind of ballpark costs where we're going to be, and then reverse engineer that project from there and give them decisions to try and fit that budget. And I feel like 75% of jobs, maybe more, end up going over budget at that point once customers start seeing what they want and what it costs to actually get them. And they kind of see where that money's going, and are more willing to do that. So I guess it's somewhat of a compromise because it's a little more hand holding and everything else. But at the end of the day, you're selling a higher dollar job and getting to do better work.
I found I had some customers who you'd given them a proposal to do the project based on the specs that you had, and things like windows, they'd say, well, they wouldn't say that. They said, well, this is too much. What can we change to get the cost to go down? And I just say, you really can't change anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you change anything, you're going to have less quality.
Right.
And I just walk away from jobs like that because I didn't want to get into a situation where, somebody wants to bring the cost down and you say, well, we could do this, but I don't really want to put those kind of windows into the house. So
We're going through that on a job right now, and it's, all right, we're at X amount for this space and we want to get it here. And okay, well then here's your option for that lower price. And they're like, well, then we really have to change everything. I'm like, exactly. This is the call. I can't give you that initial design for a lower price. Like, if you want a lower price, this is what we can give you. And sometimes they understand that and sometimes they don't. And I feel like most customers at that point, after they've gone through that entire process for you, are more willing, or with you, are more willing to spend that money because they want what they want and they see what their two options are at that point.
right.
What's it take to get on the show as far as like for a client?
That's really up to the producers. I mean, it's changed a little bit over the years. We used to all sit down and see the proposals that would come in, which are by the hundreds. So typically,
Someone would approach you guys, hey,
Well,
I want to renovate my house.
well, they go on the website and there's a
I got
pathway there that you have to send in certain amount of what you want to do. It can only be a certain limited amount of
Sure.
information. It's got to be something that can be done within a particular time period.
Mm-hmm.
Usually people who have already hired an architect and have an idea what they want to do have a better chance because they've already probably thought about financing and they got ready to build, and tried not to do projects that year after year that are too close to what we've done in the previous year.
Right.
So they used to come in and the producers would go through them, and then they're of course looking for content to make sure the show looks different. I mean, the show looks a lot different now than it did 30, 35 years ago. I mean, we used to do really long segments and, really detailed installation, which I kind of miss that. I also miss working with homeowners because early homeowners worked with us, which was nice. We'd leave them things to do and they would do it over the weekend, and you teach them something and then let them do it. So it's really up to the producers in the end, and it's up to the GC. I mean, like Tommy, he'll have Charlie, or Tommy when he was still doing it, they come up with a price. Mm-hmm. Usually that every client says that's too much, as you know, and it goes from there. So there's no magic to it. I mean, people think, well, first of all, people don't read the fine print. They think it's free or that there's benefits. There used to be more benefits. Manufacturers would contribute more materials than they tend to do now, although it's still there. What they don't understand is that they get taxed for that as well because it's considered a gift. So it's hit or miss. It's like winning the lottery. I keep telling people it's like winning the lottery. If you get into this show, you're going to get, at least from our Tommy, because our remote projects, some of those varied. I think the contractors we selected weren't the best or that got signed up for it. But with Tom Silva, you're going to get high quality work no matter how much it costs. And it's going to get done on time, which is going to be faster than the real world because the TV show is driving the schedule.
Right.
And some of the clients probably did complain that it cost more than they expected it to, but I don't think in the end that they were unhappy with the work.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not alone. Every customer thinks it's too much money.
Yeah. It's always the initial reaction, and that's like, all right, well, it is going back to your point about value engineering. It becomes this conversation where you start losing interest. Because if you're that far off, right, and they're expecting to get to a certain number, and we know what it takes to get that much off the project, you tend to forget to reevaluate whether is that project still my model, or am I bringing this so far away from what I want to promote as our product just to get it done for the client.
It's tough. I mean, you and I just had a similar issue.
Yeah.
Same job,
yeah.
Same job, and it's right in my wheelhouse. Like, it's 10 minutes from one of my other jobs. So I was like, and I liked the architect part of it, meaning they came to us, they have an architect out of Chicago. I gave that probably more value than it should have had, meaning I figured that when it's vetted by a local architect.
I felt the same exact way.
And I'm like, good.
Yeah.
And like, I looked up the architect. I'm like, all right, they do some really cool stuff. It makes sense. Let's see the drawings. I have a call with the architect, and I go meet them. And it's two different universes. From what the architect has drawn to what they discussed. Like, I was on the phone with them going, you have all cedar shake on the outside. All your rakes, rafter tails, everything's cedar. I'm like, you're top of the spectrum, on everything. And I go, they filled out my form on the website, and it was like $350. I'm like, that doesn't jive. I'm like, not trying to be rude, or I'm like just saying, where does this stand in the project? And I'm like, all right, I'll still go meet with them because whatever. And then I meet with them, and it's people always wonder, like, when do you realize it? Right away. I was like, no one's broke it to them that they can't afford this house. What's designed. And then I felt bad that when I was on the phone with the architect, I'm like, how would you value engineer this project? And he's like, we'd, maybe take the garage part of it out of it. The main house and the garage turns into all the bedrooms. Both bedrooms, the master suite. I'm like, how do you take that program out? Where does it go? And he's like, we haven't gotten that far. And I'm like, immediately with the architect, I'm like, I'm too early into this project because they need to do that bidding thing. And then you got the same thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
Wow.
It was. I had the same reaction to when I spoke with the architect. You know, he's throwing square foot numbers out. I'm like, all right. I mean, you're not far off. Let me look. And then I'm like, wait, what square footage were you counting?
Yeah.
Because there's way more, and it just, you know, it was a really cool project, and we actually found out that we were both looking at it on, I think, 2 podcasts ago.
Yeah.
After the podcast, I was like, what was the address of that?
Yeah. But it's funny. It turned into not me so much losing a job or a project. It turned it into like, how do I educate these guys a little bit before I leave? Meaning I start dropping like, you know, if you need any help, you know, facilitating anything with like Wellesley or permitting, in case I'm not the right fit for this, because it's like, just, I don't want to leave on bad blood, but I also don't want to be the guy to be like, you need to double or triple your budget, like
I was that guy,
or pull the scope way back.
Yeah. We did a back and napkin estimate because they were asking, and I said, yeah, it was like, I think it was triple what they had originally filled out.
If he's telling you triple, it was like 5.
we talked about the.
Yeah, I texted him.
I didn't even put a number at it. I was just like,
hey, just so you know, this is where I came in, like back and napkin, looking at it quick.
But we you know, design. You talk about homeowners. You know, they really don't know what they want, or they'll pull something out of a book. When we did our project, I drew a layout. My wife and we drew a layout of the living space we wanted on the first floor. And if you look at that sketch that we did way before we had the architectural drawings, it's almost identical. The only thing that happened with us and the architect is, first thing she did is she moved the front door over to another area. And I said, both my wife and we said, why did you do that? I said, well, you're going to walk into the house and you're going to end up in a hallway. This house has a fantastic view, and our whole purpose was to set it up so it's positioned so people don't see the view until they get in the house.
Cool.
So with landscaping to screen it a little bit. So you come in a pretty long driveway, and when you walk in the front door, you can see through into the kitchen. You get a little bit of the kitchen, you get the dining room, and there's windows there that you start to see the view. And as soon as you walk into that kitchen, everything just opens up, you know.
That's something I wish I was better at, is space plan, like layout, room layout. You know, no matter how many times I draw, you know, especially like for my own house, I'm just I'm not good at it.
Well,
it'll come.
Right, when we laid out the house, when we laid out the house, because it's a big long house, it's long, very long, and so I worked, and it's got a lot of jogs. That was another joke we had when we had the first meeting with the architect and the contractor. And I'm sitting there going, oh, every corner, that means more money. and he looked at me like, uh-oh, I don't know if I want to work with this guy. And because it's got a lot of corners and a lot of different roof lines. And so I'd stake every corner of the house with a friend of mine so I could bring my wife Elise in and say, when you're standing in the dining room, that's what you're going to see. And then so I get to the end, it's the master bedroom. She goes, it's too small. I said, it's not too small. It's bigger than the master bedroom we have now. Oh, it's too small. I said, I'm not changing it. Now that it's done, she said, you're right. It's plenty of room in the master bedroom. But that was an advantage you have because we're in the trade. When you're in the trade, you kind of know, what you want. And with this piece of land, when we saw it, there was immediately kind of like had a vision of what it should look like. The only thing she did in the first sketch, she was brilliant in the massing of the house, because once we had the living space, how she was going to do the garage and everything, that's where her brilliance really came through. But the first sketch she sent me, it looked a little bit like a cape. She had like the doghouse dormers on the front of it. I said, no doghouse dormers. I hate doghouse dormers. I want this to look arts and crafts. I want shed dormers. And she said, okay. And then she started redoing it again. And we had some great meetings with her. She was great.
I love shed dormers. The house that we were just looking at when we were traveling, an old house that they put shed dormers on. And I feel like I love the look of like a properly proportioned and integrated shed dormer.
Yeah.
Such a good look.
Shed dormer, perfect. And we flared all the shingles on the bottom.
We're going to have to look at these pictures you have.
Yeah, I have some.
We'll just go take a visit.
Yeah, you can come and visit.
I was going to ask that after the podcast.
You could do that.
I'll help you move tools the Yankee Workshop down.
We'll finish
Yeah.
up your trim at your
We
existing
got an empty
house.
van.
You got an empty
Yeah.
van?
He's got a van here.
Tommy said he already. Well, one of the tools that I wanted out of the workshop was the wide belt sander, which they gave. It was given to us. It was supposed to be loaned, and they never came and picked it up again. So I said to Russ, I said, "I want the sander." He goes, "It's yours." I said, "Good. I'll make sure I have a place for it."
Don't tell anyone. They're going to call you, come knocking on your door asking for it back. That wide belt that we loaned you.
Norm, I got a couple questions that were
All right.
submitted to our podcast. So I have not filtered through them, but I'm going to, and kind of rapid fire. First one, do you remember working with Frenchie Barrow from Winchester?
No.
Sorry, Frenchie.
I'm really bad with names, so that probably is my biggest weakness.
That was Bell Road Gardens. Does he still have all his fingers?
Yes.
9. Yeah, 10. Do you miss just building stuff in the shop?
I think I don't know. I wouldn't say I miss it. I needed a break from it. I mean, the 21 years in New Yankee Workshop, cranking out those 2 or 3 versions of the same one every time we went through, you know, 5 books. I needed a break. And, you know, like I said, sailboat's next.
I think that's awesome. If you had to estimate, how many flannels or plaid shirts do you own?
I guess he never saw the video where we joked about it. I walked into my closet and it was just filled with shirts, and I was trying to figure out which one I wanted to wear that day. I kind of, you know, I got away from the flannel, and people were complaining about it. My wife won't let me like throw them in the Goodwill box, so there's a whole closet full of flannel shirts. And I lost weight, so
Could probably sell 'em.
some of them are too big now.
I know. Wait, isn't there a story about the flannels?
Yeah, I saw it online that I read a part that your flannel shirts inspired the character Al from the sitcom
Yeah.
Home Improvement.
Yeah, that's what they say. That was Bob, and it was supposed to be me. I met, what's his name, the actor? I met him once in California. We had dinner together.
Tim the Two-Man Taylor?
Yeah, he knows nothing about building, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, he said to me, "I know nothing about
It's
building."
amazing. This is random. What do you use to sharpen your chisels?
I just usually use one of those, the
Soapstone?
diamond imprinted. Well, I'll use regular stone or the diamond imprinted. You know, it's like got a plastic sheet on it underneath it.
Mhm.
I like those. They're faster.
What was the first thing that you ever built?
It's funny that you asked that. I was just sharpening my chisels last night, and I have like cuts all over my finger from testing how sharp they are. And
Well,
I
you
legit,
submitted
like,
the
see-
question.
No, I didn't. But look, my hair's
It's
missing.
gone.
Here. That's how you know that it's sharp.
Test it. What was the question?
What was the first thing you ever built?
Well, I was talking about this to somebody the other day. So my first toolbox was a handy toolbox, and it had real saw, real chisel, and all that. And I used to build for my sister. I used to just take scrap wood, and I would build these things. They really, like, I'd build her for the sandbox. I'd build her like an oven. They never really looked like an oven. It was just a bunch of boards nailed
Say,
together.
hey, this is an oven.
Right. And I remember one time I had this little trailer I used to pull behind my 3-wheeler, and my father, he had a bunch of wood, so I built this thing all out of wood, made it like closed it all in. So I can't remember the first one, but it was all little things in the beginning, certainly.
Is it true that you like stereo equipment more than carpentry?
No.
Look, he just saw his face.
Yeah.
It's on a video.
Sorry, James.
He wouldn't admit it if it were.
What was your favorite house you've ever worked on?
The second house of the Bigelow house for the Dassault house is probably the house that I enjoyed the most. It was probably one of the biggest challenges, and the results were just terrific.
It's awesome. What did you do when you were given a job that you didn't know how to do before the internet? So if you had to fix that
before I had to fix that
weed trimmer,
what did I do?
Without the internet?
Encyclopedias, right?
Maybe, we used to have the encyclopedias. I don't know. I'd probably just keep doing it until I get so frustrated. It was either going to work or it wasn't.
Smash it.
Throw it out. Yeah.
And another one for the flannel shirts. And actually, Lasana, one of the kids that works for me, what would you change about the industry today?
Good question.
The building industry as a whole.
This is supposed to be a rapid fire question.
That's a hard.
Deep.
That's a really
deep.
hard question to
It's like an
answer.
essay question.
Gee, I don't know. That's a tough one. I really don't know how to answer that one.
Good
I mean,
job,
one of the
Lasana.
things
You're
about
stumping Norm.
the building industry. I mean, I think one of the things that I've seen more recently that's of a concern is codes. A lot of what's going into building codes, to me, in some respects, isn't doing us any good, and it's raising the cost of homes. I know, they're always supposed to be for the better interest, but sometimes I think it's over the top.
Sure.
And this one, he gives the answer, but what is the most important tool in the shop?
Table saw.
Ooh. 2 people said the same thing and said safety glasses.
Wow, that's true. But tool, I don't.
Table saw.
Table saw is the center of the shop.
I'd agree with that.
Before we wrap things up, so when I was in college, we went down. I went to Drexel, and I was a construction management student, and they sent 4 or 5 of the students down to IBS. And when I went down, my wife took woodworking classes. She took like shop classes in high school, and I met her at college. And when I went down, she had like made this joke to go say hi to Norm Abram. So I like legit made it a point. I was courting my wife at this point and made it a point to come visit you and got you to sign a photo of yourself that said to Rachel. And I gave it to my wife like when we had
Do you
first
have
met.
it?
Now, I mean, maybe she might.
Dude, I
It
would
was
have dug that up.
It's like
Brought it today.
when we first met, I was 21 when I went to school, and met her, and it was like kind of a joke to be like, hey, I'd taken wood class, like trying to say, hey, I know who Norm Abrams is, like you're in construction, and like made it a point to go and get her a photo signed and sent to her, which is pretty funny.
That's amazing.
So maybe I wouldn't be married with 2 children and my wife if you're responsible for all of this whole mess.
Norm, so wrapping this up, what is one thing that you see that we could do as the Modern Craftsman, as builders, as contractors, as craftsmen to help continue to better our industry?
I think you just have to keep doing what we've talked about today. I mean, you've got apprentices, and trying to convince local people in your areas, especially the schools, to get the shops back in again if possible. Like I said, I was encouraged to hear a couple people go through the other day saying that they were teaching kids this new thing, and you're doing a valuable thing now. If you've got apprentices on the job, you're doing something that's really important to the industry, and I think you got to keep doing that and
Cool.
move forward.
What about next generation from this old house? How do people get involved with that? How do they connect?
They send in a video of what they want to do. I usually try to watch them before they get selected. And one of them, Mary, who was on the Jamestown project, I guess the show's going to go shoot her. She had a I don't know if you know her story, but she had a bakery and she wanted to learn how to be a builder, so she sold it. And then her video she sent was fantastic. And she's up in Maine now becoming a timber framer, and I guess the show's going to go up and visit her
That's cool.
this week or sometime soon. So
That's awesome.
I feel like we met her at IBS, possibly.
We might have.
Yeah, right?
yeah, she came. I think she was there. I think the one that was earlier.
Yeah.
This year. Yeah,
Yep.
the 100,000 attendees.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It was all because of Nick.
I took responsibility last year, not this year. Norm, this was an absolute pleasure.
This
Thank
is
you for
fun
taking
talking
the
to
time.
you guys. I wish all of you the best and trying to keep this industry going along and doing the good work.
Well, you're certainly responsible for a lot of it,
No, thank you.
and we appreciate the time tonight and everything you put into it thus far.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Enjoy
Glad
that
to be
house.
here. Yeah, we will. Heading into those years.
Wait, are you on Instagram?
No.
No.
I'm sort
I
of
know
a-
they're getting. I
I'm
know
the
they got
anti-
Charlie on
I'm
there,
the,
Tom.
I'm the anti-social media guy. they
that was me.
put me on Twitter. They put me on Twitter, and as soon as they set me up, my wife and we went to Italy for our 15th, and I sent them a picture of the giant door that was in this rundown
and they tweeted it.
remnants. I tweeted that.
Oh, you did.
And then they said, "Oh, you're in Italy." I said, "Yep, going back again too." No, I don't know. I just can't. Maybe I'm just too old. I can't wrap myself around it.
No, at the end of the show, we always wrap up where people can find, our guest. Obviously, you can be on the show, but if you had social media, I want to shout it out. But if not, then
I still have the Facebook. The Facebook account is still there, and I check it once in a while, but I haven't been responding very much with it.
Otherwise, the show and any of the events. Any events coming up that we should know about?
Let's see. Well, we got this. What we do have coming up this in August is people can pay attention. There's gonna be a special 90-minute show that's gonna go across PBS the entire country. They will feature the history of this old house from day one to the current. And it's 90 minutes, but my understanding is that they're going to take 30 minutes of it, and local stations will be able to do fundraising at the same time. But you will see me with only a mustache and my holy pants, and you hear me thin and fat, and
it's a progression.
You'll see a lot more than you need to see.
All right, cool. You have something?
No, I was just saying he also is an author of 8 books, so people could dig into
5 new Yankee books, which were project books. Usually by theme.
Mm-hmm.
Book on the building of my house. Measure Twice, Cut Once, which is probably the easiest book that I did. And then when we had the magazine, there was a whole book series that came out too.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was busy for a while.
Yeah, you were.
Very good. So you can find us at themoderncraftsman.org. You can email us at info@themoderncraftsman. Find us on Instagram, _Modern Craftsman, and all our podcast apps.
Yep.
You can download us or download the episodes. You can find a lot of these on YouTube. This episode has been recorded. It will be uploaded to YouTube. Yeah.
I feel like that's it.
Subscribe, listen, learn.
There you go.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.
All right.